Chapter 291. Jiang Hai didn't care about what happened to Henry Morgan. He was too lazy to care. Anyway, Henry Morgan had been dead for almost 400 years. However, Jiang Hai was still very interested in his treasure. His target this time was the sunken ship called Sin City. Of course, this name was written on the sea map. Jiang Hai wasn't sure if it was real or not. In fact, many people knew about this ship. Even the British government knew about it because it was very famous when it sank. At that time, the United States was not as powerful as it was now. At the beginning, this place was also a colony of European countries. After 1773, the United Kingdom alone gained the upper hand. Before that, this place was a colony of Britain, France, Holland, Germany, and other countries. When the United Kingdom and Spain were in deep trouble, Henry Morgan naturally focused his attention not only on South America, but also on North America, especially Florida. After all, this place was the estuary of the Caribbean Sea. Usually, when gathering grass to beat rabbits, they would always attack once or twice. This ship was blocked by the Spanish fleet here after robbing the Spanish colony in North America. After a big battle, although Henry Morgan escaped, he also left behind a few battleships. Some of the more submerged ships had long been divided by the United Kingdom and Spain. Later, some of the more submerged ships were gradually salvaged after entering the later era of science and technology. However, only the ship with the most jewelry had not been salvaged because this ship was really unlucky. In this sea area, there was almost an oceanic trench. But coincidentally, there was only one trench. The deepest one was more than 3,700 meters, and this ship happened to be stuck at a depth of about 1,760 meters. At this depth, it was impossible for people to go down. If they sent a submarine or something like that, they were afraid that the ship would fall more than 3,000 meters. Then it would be even more impossible to salvage it. So, although they knew that the ship was here, there was nothing they could do. If they lost it, they were reluctant. If they could salvage it, they couldn't do it. They couldn't even get the things inside. So in the end, whether it was the United States or the United Kingdom, they decided to leave it here. Anyway, it wouldn't be lost. Later on, when the fisherman was selling these treasure maps, some people also found this place. However, after taking a look, they were prepared to go back and beat that guy up. It was impossible to fish up such a boat. However, it didn't mean that Jiang Hai couldn't do it. At least, Jiang Hai was working hard for this. The speed of the engine wasn't slow, and Jiang Hai was also the fastest, about 20 nautical miles per hour. Jiang Hai ran for nearly 6 hours in the water, and when he reached the trench, it was already midnight. Looking at his Rolex watch, Jiang Hai turned on the headlight, but as soon as he turned it on, he was shocked. He turned on his headlight and saw a huge fish swimming quickly in front of him. Subconsciously, he wanted to grab the spear gun. But when he looked closely, he realized that the fish was not a shark, but a bluefin tuna, which was more valuable than any other shark. Looking at the blue lines on its back and its streamlined body, Zhang Zian was shocked. Jiang Hai breathed a sigh of relief. As long as it wasn't a shark, this fish couldn't attack him. After the fish swam away quickly, Jiang Hai also looked around. The Atlantic bluefin tuna was actually a fish that lived in groups. With a sweep of the headlight, Jiang Hai also found that in the vicinity, in addition to the Atlantic bluefin tuna he saw just now, there were many other tunas, but the species were a bit mixed. Most of them were Atlantic bluefin, but some of them were yellowfin. After raising fish for so many years, Jiang Hai's ability to judge fish was still there. According to Jiang Hai's preliminary estimate, if it wasn't for the hype of the kingfish, this batch of tuna was worth about $2 million. This made Jiang Hai smack his lips. This was more profitable than raising cattle. Salmon, American redfish, compared with this fish, it was really not a grade worse. Unfortunately, there was no way to cultivate these fish because this fish had to swim around all year round. The area of his own fishery was still too small, and there was no way to sell this kind of fish seedlings. There were no live ones, let alone artificial breeding. This was just for show. If Jiang Hai came here by boat, he could get a few on board, provided that they were not discovered by others. One must know that there was a time limit to the fishing of tuna. Every year from August to October, it was the time to fish for tuna. After this time, it was not allowed to fish. So Jiang Hai could only sigh regretfully and plunge into the deep sea. As the numbers on Jiang Hai's GPS kept jumping, Jiang Hai was getting farther and farther away from sea level. Along the way, Jiang Hai saw a lot of creatures. Most of them were fish. Of course, there were some other things occasionally. For example, jellyfish and the like, and even Jiang Hai saw a few sharks in the distance. But unfortunately, they were all small sharks, either cat sharks or mackerel sharks. These sharks were not big in size. When they saw the light source, they would come over to take a look, but they would leave immediately after taking a look. Obviously, the sharks here had seen humans and suffered losses in the hands of humans. They were unwilling to meet Jiang Hai face to face. As the water got deeper and deeper, Jiang Hai also felt that the water temperature was getting colder and colder. Even if he was wearing fluffy clothes inside, Jiang Hai felt a little cold and couldn't help but shrink his neck. The temperature of the sea changed all year round. The temperature of the sea level was related to the local temperature, but 350 meters below the sea level, basically the whole world, except for the North Pole and the South Pole, the temperature was about the same. This layer was also called the thermosphere, and below the thermosphere, the deeper 1 kilometer, the colder it would be. Take the Atlantic Ocean, for example. The average temperature of the Atlantic Ocean was 16 degrees. 9 degrees. 1 kilometer below the surface of the water temperature was about 4 to 5 degrees. 1 kilometer below, it was 2 to 3 degrees. About 3 kilometers below, it was more than 1 degree. Although Jiang Hai is now extremely resistant, it is not to the extent that he can avoid cold and heat, but as long as the temperature is not negative 20 or 30 degrees, Jiang Hai still has no problem. As the bottom of the sea got deeper and deeper, after 1 kilometer, the fish around Jiang Hai completely disappeared. Originally, before 1 kilometer, he occasionally saw a very ugly fish, lanternfish, whose scientific name is deep-sea anglerfish. It looks similar to an anglerfish, but there is a small light on its head, which attracts other small fish to look at it curiously. Then it eats the fish. This kind of fish basically lives between 700 and 900 meters. After 1 kilometer, this kind of fish disappeared. It seemed that in an instant, there was only Jiang Hai in the whole world. Except for the place where the headlight shone, the other places were dark. To be honest, such a scene is really scary. After all, there is nothing around him. In Jiang Hai's mind, he unconsciously imagined that he was swimming in front of some sea monsters, preparing to prey on him. Fortunately, he knows that this is just his imagination. While giving himself courage, he maintained his focus and continued to swim downstream. At about 2:00 in the morning, Jiang Hai's headlight, which can illuminate 200 meters, finally found his target, Sin City. This is a very old medieval galleon. The whole length of the ship is about 30 meters, and the width is about half of the length, about 15 meters. Although the sinking time is longer than the time Jiang Hai saw the sunken ship last time, perhaps because it has been in the deep sea, there is no oxygen and no sunlight, so the natural corrosion is much lower. How can Jiang Hai live without oxygen? Well, Jiang Hai also doesn't know how he lives here. Anyway, he doesn't feel suffocated. At this time, the ship was in an I shape. The bow and stern of the ship happened to be stuck on both sides of the sea. It was just hanging there. The sails and other things on the ship had long rotted away. Some of the ship's planks and other things were also broken. Some passing kelp has taken root and sprouted in the empty cabin. It floats around with the current under the water, as if it is saying, "Come on, come on." But who knows what the result will be after going there? On the bow of the ship, the Virgin Mary, which was originally made of metal, can no longer be seen at this time. Only a lot of shellfish can be seen parasitizing there. There are also some plants that Jiang Hai can't name. Looking at the appearance of the ship, Jiang Hai feels that the cold wind in his head seems to be getting stronger and stronger. The whole ship gives people the feeling of a ghost ship. Well, this is a ghost ship to begin with. Jiang Hai deliberately looked at the ship when he was descending. The ship is just hanging on the edge of the cliff. Although he is not sure if the ship can withstand the impact of his fall, Jiang Hai is not prepared to try. If it can't withstand the impact and falls, won't he have to live more than 2,000 meters downstream? That would be too tiring. So he is prepared to lie down on the cliffs on both sides first, then slowly walk to the ship. But the moment Jiang Hai shines the headlight on the cliffs on both sides, his scalp feels like it is exploding. The hair on his whole body tightens in an instant, and his hair stands on end. His whole back gives a dense feeling of disgust. He almost can't hold the engine in his hand. Fortunately, he is a brave person. He forcibly grabbed the engine and turned it off, preventing it from falling. Jiang Hai swallowed another mouthful of saliva. He resisted the disgust and looked at the cliffs on both sides. Under the illumination of his headlight, the cliffs on both sides are densely packed with countless insects. Looking at these insects, Jiang Hai subconsciously stopped in the middle. He doesn't know what to do. Chapter 292. Phew, calm down, calm down. Jiang Hai placed the engine behind him and took 2 deep breaths. Well, he didn't know what he was inhaling, but he was just comforting himself to calm down. Then he looked at the worms again. The smallest of these worms was as big as an adult's head. They had a fleshy brown body and were just lying there, moving their tentacles from time to time. They had a hard shell on their back and looked like a cockroach, but they didn't have wings. The one that looked the most similar to a cockroach was the tideworm. Its Chinese name was ratwoman. Usually, people who lived in a one-story house, or if the house was damp, would be prone to this worm. It wasn't big, only 3 to 5 centimeters long. It didn't bite and wasn't poisonous, so it wasn't harmful to humans. It mainly ate leaves and vegetables and was a threat to nature. But in fact, tideworms originally lived in the sea. They were the only crustaceans that adapted to living on land. They were considered close relatives to crabs, shrimps, lobsters, and so on. They didn't want to eat shrimps at all. The creature in front of Jiang Hai was called the giant deep-sea louse. In fact, it was the tideworm of the sea. Although this creature wasn't as herbivorous as the tideworm, it wasn't a threat to humans. Although this creature was carnivorous, it wasn't a ferocious creature. They only cleaned the carcasses of animals at the bottom of the sea. Their combat power was really weak. Jiang Hai entered the deep sea and was already heavily armed, not to mention these deep-sea creatures. Therefore, he more or less understood the situation. After seeing the creature clearly, Jiang Hai gradually calmed down. He glanced at the ship below and swam towards the cliff. Perhaps they felt the change in the water flow. When Jiang Hai swam over, the deep-sea louse quickly crawled away. Obviously, compared to Jiang Hai, who was afraid of them, they were more afraid of Jiang Hai. This allowed Jiang Hai to gently lie down on the cliff. After slowly climbing down, Jiang Hai arrived at the bow of the ship. Jiang Hai's feet left the cliff, and with a light step, he was already standing on the Maria statue on the bow of the ship. Bang! When Jiang Hai's foot landed, although he only added a little weight, the ship still shook. This gave Jiang Hai a fright. Fortunately, the ship only shook a little before it stopped shaking. This made Jiang Hai feel relieved. But just as he took a step forward, a shadow flashed in front of him. This gave him another scare, but when the headlight shone over, he couldn't help but feel a little stuffy. This was a devouring eel. There were many photos of this thing on the internet. It had a big head and a body as thin as a rope. The longest they could grow was 1.8 meters. They lived in the deep sea, but they still posed no threat to him. Sigh. How dare I? Jiang Hai was speechless as he watched the devouring eel swim away. Ever since he entered the bottom of the sea, he had been startled. It was too tiring. When did he become so timid? In fact, it wasn't Jiang Hai's fault. People would always have some fear of the unknown, just like him now. There is nothing to be afraid of. There is nothing to be afraid of. After giving himself a boost of courage, Jiang Hai took out the spear gun behind him. Next time, if anyone scares him, he will shoot them without hesitation. Since Jiang Hai wanted to come to the deep sea, he naturally checked the information. In fact, in the deep sea, except for some poisonous creatures, at least among the animals found by humans, there were almost no animals that were a threat to humans. In the deep sea, there were 4 kinds of creatures with the most aggressive. The giant squid was divided into 2 kinds, the king squid and the giant spear squid. The king squid was up to 20 meters long, and the giant spear squid was bigger than the king squid, which was a threat to humans. Second, the sperm whale, after all, was a carnivorous whale. It was definitely a threat. Third, the six-jaw shark, which was an extremely ancient shark. It had not evolved since it evolved 200 million years ago. It was one of the overlords in the deep sea. Fourthly, the emperor ribbonfish, which was the thing that was always regarded as the Dragon King, could grow up to 15 meters long. However, there was a problem. This kind of fish had no teeth and moved very slowly. It was not much faster than a human walking in the water. This hunting game was like an eel, hiding in a place and then waiting for a fish to come over. Then it would suck the fish in and be done with it. Except for these 4 creatures, there were no deep-sea creatures that were a threat to Zhang Hai. Sometimes Zhang Hai thought too much. After taking a few deep breaths, Zhang Hai walked forward. Of course, knowing was knowing, but humans still knew little about the deep sea after all. If there were any messy creatures, it would be troublesome. If a plesiosaur or basilosaurus came out, wouldn't Zhang Hai be finished here? So it would never be wrong to be careful. Walking forward little by little, Zhang Hai found that there were still many creatures in the vicinity. For example, there was a fish swimming by him at this time. This fish was about 15 or 16 centimeters long and looked very ugly. The tawu was ugly, but in fact, compared to it, the tawu was actually a very beautiful fish. It could be raised as an ornamental fish. This kind of fish was not big, but it was earth-shattering. Perhaps in the deep sea, no one could see each other when they reached adulthood. This kind of fish had almost the same face as the tawu, but its big teeth were crooked and protruding out like this. So it was even more ugly. This fish was called fong, and it was a very common fish in the deep sea. From 500 meters to 5,000 meters below sea level, it was their paradise. In fact, according to human standards, 200 meters below sea level was the deep sea. In addition to this deep sea overlord, Zhang Hai also saw a very beautiful creature. Zhang Hai had only seen this creature dead. This creature was called string eel. Unlike the ugly devouring eel, this string eel was very beautiful. Its entire body was like a string. It had a long mouth and big eyes. Most importantly, this kind of string eel could emit light. Moreover, its skin was transparent, and one could see its internal organs. Therefore, when it flashed, it was quite beautiful. But unfortunately, these creatures could not be taken to the surface. The water pressure was different, so they would die if they went up. In addition, there were a lot of shellfish and insects here. Zhang Hai had always been disinterested in insects. Therefore, he only took a glance and quickly walked towards the depths of the ship, following what he had learned. Such a ship, the first floor and plate armor, had almost no treasures. The first floor was the captain's room. If it was not the captain's main ship, then it was the first mate who was the captain. The second floor was where the sailors lived. There was also a cannon room, a warehouse for vegetables and wine, and a kitchen. Some pirates would put their treasures on the second floor because the space in the warehouse was not enough, but this ship was so big that it was almost impossible. The only treasures that could be found on the second floor were those that the pirates directly divided after robbing and kept. But the probability of this was not very high, so Zhang Hai's goal was the third floor. Of course, when he passed by the second floor, it was also good to take a look. Zhang Hai walked slowly forward on the plate armor. After reaching the captain's room, he also took a look inside. The door of the captain's room had long been lost. As a result, there was nothing inside. Other than scaring away 2 vampire squid, there was nothing else. As for the vampire squid, it was just a name. This kind of small squid, the largest was only 15 centimeters. Unless it was caught and looked at closely, it was a little scary. Other than that, there was no other effect. Zhang Hai was afraid, but he would not be afraid of these things. After confirming that there was nothing in the captain's room, Zhang Hai followed the passage of the first floor of the plate armor and slowly climbed to the second floor. After entering the second floor, under the sweep of the headlamp, there was nothing else except for some fangs and line eels. Jiang Hai walked down carefully. Compared to the first floor, the door on the second floor was much better maintained. Perhaps it was because it opened inwards. It was still well preserved, but unfortunately, Jiang Hai was not a person who liked to preserve cultural relics. Anyway, he could not get on this ship, so he did not hold back. Holding the spear in both hands, Jiang Hai went up and kicked a wooden door directly out. The situation in the cabin was reflected in Jiang Hai's sight. This should be a sailor's room. There were 2 bunk beds in it, and there were some sawdust and some clothes that were blown up by Jiang Hai's kick. Other than that, there was nothing else. Jiang Hai couldn't help but curl his lips after glancing at it. Sure enough, it was as he thought. There were probably not many treasures in these sailors' rooms. But just as he was about to leave, he suddenly saw a reflection in the corner of the upper bunk of a bed. This made Jiang Hai a little surprised, so he slowly swam in and came to the second floor. After 400 years, the wood of the bed would certainly not be able to withstand Jiang Hai's footsteps. Now that it had a shape, it was already quite difficult. Therefore, Jiang Hai could only float and look at the direction of his gaze. He saw that there was something hanging on the wooden stake at the head of the bed. Jiang Hai casually took it and couldn't help but be surprised. Because this thing was actually not corroded, and it was very hard. It looked like it should be metal. After Jiang Hai wiped away the seaweed outside this thing, Jiang Hai found that it was a piece of dark brown metal. When he opened it, it turned out to be a pocket watch. This made Jiang Hai a little surprised. This could be considered an unexpected gain. Of course, the needle in the pocket watch had long stopped working. There was not even a glass cover on it, so it didn't look very valuable. Chapter 293. Jiang Hai wasn't very sure what material this pocket watch was made of, but he was very clear that it shouldn't be ordinary iron. If it was iron, it might have already rusted. But he didn't know what it was, so he decided to take it back and study it. Jiang Hai put it in his pocket and continued to swim away. The second room was the same. He broke the door violently, but it was a pity that there was nothing this time. The third room, the fourth room, the fifth room. A sailboat like this, if one wanted to operate it and rob it, one would need close to 100 people. It was naturally impossible for 100 people to all live in a room with 4 people. Pirates were naturally divided into different ranks, and the highest was naturally the captain. Next in line was the chief officer, followed by the leaders of the various groups. Some were in charge of logistics, some were in charge of keeping watch, some were in charge of keeping track, some were in charge of inventory, some were in charge of kidnapping, and so on. Apart from these middle-level leaders, those who enjoyed the highest treatment were naturally the combatants. After all, they lived a life of bloodshed, so they lived and ate the best food. In addition to the combatants, the others were ordinary sailors and handymen. The combatants and leaders lived in a room with 4 people, but the sailors and handymen were much worse. Jiang Hai went through the rooms one by one. There were only 10 rooms with 4 bedrooms for 40 people. As for the other rooms, there were 6 rooms for 8 people. There were also 2 large bunk rooms. These were the places where all the people lived. Jiang Hai looked at Jiang Hai. In the rear bunk rooms and where the sailors lived, there wasn't much, and they didn't have much to gain. So Jiang Hai only found some things in the first 10 rooms. In addition to the pocket watch, there were 2 necklaces, and he didn't know what material they were made of. After looking through all the sailors' rooms, there were some turrets and warehouses, but there was nothing in them. The cannonballs had long disappeared, and the turrets had become broken toys. The kitchen and other things could still vaguely be seen, but they had long lost their original appearance. After looking through all the things, Jiang Hai also strolled through the second floor. Sure enough, it was as he thought. The treasure was really on the 3rd floor. Then Jiang Hai went straight to the 3rd floor, but when he came in, Jiang Hai found that the first 3 warehouses on the 3rd floor were damaged. There was nothing inside, and he could clearly see outside. It seemed that this was the reason why the ship sank. He only hoped that those people 400 years ago didn't get the treasure. If the treasure was gone, then Jiang Hai's trip would be in vain. With such thoughts in his mind, Jiang Hai continued to swim forward and soon arrived at the 4th warehouse. When the 4th warehouse was opened, suddenly a few tentacles, and with lightning speed, they wrapped around Jiang Hai. looking at the long barbed tentacles. Fortunately, Zhang Hai had been on guard. Seeing these tentacles wrapped around him, Zhang Hai didn't say anything and directly pulled the trigger. With a huge impact, the spear instantly shot into the door. It penetrated the body of the creature in the door and flew straight to the other side of the warehouse with this creature. Only hearing a loud bang, Zhang Hai felt that the ship couldn't help but shake a few times. When the shaking stopped, Zhang Hai also looked inside with the headlamp. Sure enough, the thing he had been guarding against appeared. Is this a king squid or a giant spear squid? No matter what it is, this time you are unlucky. Looking at the giant squid, which was almost 6 meters long, pinned to the wall, it was still waving its tentacles, trying to struggle. But it was thinking too much. Zhang Hai's spear was really made when he caught whales in the past. The strength of a whale couldn't break free, let alone a squid, so no matter how it struggled, it was useless. Seeing this guy, Zhang Hai didn't dare to use the spear now. After all, the ship was not very sturdy, so he took out the dagger beside him, swam to the front of this giant squid, grabbed one of its tentacles, and waved the dagger to cut it. Zhang Hai's dagger was not ordinary. Under the influence of Zhang Hai's power, the tentacle was instantly separated from the squid. Zhang Hai threw the tentacle that was still moving far away and cut the second one. He would not allow any threat to be around him. A few minutes later, all the tentacles of the squid had been cut off by Zhang Hai. The blue blood also filled this space, but Zhang Hai didn't care. No longer caring about the still squirming octopus, Zhang Hai looked at the room. With this look, Zhang Hai's eyes couldn't help but light up in an instant. He only saw that at this time the cabin was full of things. Huge chests, one after another, were thrown in the distance. However, many of the chests were broken. Inside the chests, there were things about the same size as the gold coins that Zhang Hai got before. They were scattered all over the room. Although there were moss and other things growing on them, Zhang Hai was very sure that these things should be gold or silver coins. Among these coins, there were also some pearls or gems. Although the ropes and the like had disappeared, Zhang Hai was very sure that these things were just for fun. They couldn't be made of glass, right? This was something that had been ridiculed miserably. This time, I'm rich, I'm rich. Waving his fist vigorously, Zhang Hai said excitedly. According to his vision, if these things were brought ashore, there would be more than 10 tons. Not to mention more than 10 tons of real gold, silver, pearls, and gems. The most important thing was that these things were more than 300 years ago, nearly 400 years ago. Thinking with his thumb, Zhang Hai knew that he was rich. Although there were some troubles, in front of these things, Zhang Hai felt that these troubles were nothing. Raising cattle was indeed profitable, but after paying taxes, it would be good if he could keep more than 1 billion yuan. Now that he had quietly produced so many antiques, he couldn't help but chuckle. Although the antiques of the European Middle Ages were not as good as those of the Ming Dynasty, these were still antiques. A gold coin, if sold according to the price of gold, was definitely worthless, but if it was a gold coin from 300 years ago, then it would be at least 10 times more valuable. At this time, Zhang Hai had so many in front of him, he really felt that luck was waving at him. There is still one more warehouse, I want to take a look. Then he grabbed a lot of gold coins and threw them into the bag he brought. He needed to identify these things first, and then think about how to get the things in the ship into his hands. But before going up, he had to take a look at the last warehouse, so he could rest assured. Ignoring the giant squid that was still twisting there, Zhang Hai walked into the last warehouse. This time, he didn't touch anything, and this room was a lot emptier. The whole room was not smaller than the previous one, but at this time, there were only 2 boxes. Zhang Hai swam over curiously. After confirming that there was nothing else here, Zhang Hai first smashed one of the boxes, which contained a set of armor. This set of armor was already black, but there was still a faint trace of gold, which made Zhang Hai couldn't help but think of the gold coins he picked up in the beginning. The color was not much different from this, but this one seemed to be redder, which meant that the gold content was not enough. The style of this armor was also very strange. It was the upper body, or to be exact, the whole body, because the lower body was a skirt. However, This skirt was not like the skirt of ancient Chinese battle armor. Instead, it was more like a ballet skirt. The waist of the upper body was also very, very, very thin, and the neck collar was also very high. This was the only thing in the entire box. Zhang Hai couldn't help but be confused. Is this really armor? Although he was a little curious, Zhang Hai still put this armor aside for the time being, and then smashed the other box. But as soon as this box was opened, Zhang Hai had some regrets, because he should have opened this box gently. If one of the things inside was broken, then he would really be distressed because at this time there was a pair of vases in front of him. The base color of these two vases was white, and there were blue patterns on them. Zhang Hai could clearly see that there was a dragon pattern and a phoenix pattern on the vase. Looking at these two things, Zhang Hai's heartbeat couldn't help but slow down by half a beat. He was very sure that these things should be real. After all, no one had come to this ship for more than 300 years. Naturally, it was impossible for someone to deliberately dive underwater and put a pair of vases on the ship in these years. In addition, the style of this vase was more than 300 years old. As long as one carefully thought about it, anyone who knew a little about history would take a deep breath, because this style, this time, this dynasty, only represented one thing: Ming Qinghua. Thinking of this, Zhang Hai felt that his heart was about to jump out. His head couldn't help but be a little dazed, and he also felt a little weak. There was also a feeling of palpitations. He knew that this meant that his blood pressure was high. But now, not to mention high blood pressure, even if blood rushed to his brain, it couldn't stop his surging emotions. Ming Qinghua, Ming Qinghua. These three words were like the Monkey King's band-tightening spell. They kept repeating in Zhang Hai's mind, making him tremble unconsciously. My God, my God, my God, compared with these two things, the things in that room are nothing. Zhang Hai scolded secretly, waving his fist vigorously. This adventure was so worth it. With trembling hands, Zhang Hai slowly picked up one of the vases, turned it upside down, and looked at it. There were 6 big words written on it. Ming Dynasty Wanli Year. Chapter 294. Hey, boss, you're finally back. If you didn't come back, they would have killed me. But to be honest, your medical skills are really amazing. The legendary ancient Chinese medicine can actually cure congenital deafness and muteness. This time, I've really learned something. Watching Zhang Hai walk into his suite with a huge bag on his back, Moses Adams, who was also in the suite at this time, immediately greeted him excitedly. Behind him were Aphrodite and the others with a bitter face. Last night, when Zhang Hai left, he actually told Moses Adams, but he didn't care. He thought that Zhang Hai just went out to have fun. After all, he was a man. Moreover, when they were in New York, the two of them also had a lot of fun. These days, Zhang Hai looked at his daughters all day long. He really didn't have time and leisure to play. Indeed, in Moses Adams' view, although Zhang Hai only had 2 daughters, Delina and Marion. But for so many days, under the intentional guidance of Aphrodite and the others, Zhang Hai didn't touch them. In Moses Adams' view, Zhang Hai probably regarded these girls as his daughters. Otherwise, there was no reason for him not to touch them. Aphrodite and the others were very good-looking. At least in his view, they met both the Western and Eastern aesthetic standards. Their figures were also very good. In such a case, there was only one possibility that the women took the initiative and Zhang Hai was still indifferent. What? Mental misophobia? Don't mess around. Zhang Hai even touched those socialites. What else couldn't he do? As for the problem that rabbits don't eat the grass near their burrows, he had long ignored it. It was also possible that the Europeans and Americans didn't have such an idea. Rabbits eat grass, so naturally, they would eat any grass. Why are you only back now? Didn't you say that it would be safer for us to stay in the hotel? Why did you go out by yourself for so long? You even didn't come back for the night. Seeing Zhang Hai's apologetic look, Aphrodite was pushed forward by the others. Although she didn't want to criticize Zhang Hai, she was the elder sister among them. Daliana and Marion didn't feel right to criticize Zhang Hai. After all, she was the daughter. Therefore, if she had any opinions, she would always raise them to Jiang Hai. As she spoke, her resentful little eyes kept drifting towards Jiang Hai. Her meaning was very obvious. There are so many free things at home, but you don't want them and insist on going out to have fun. Are all men so unreliable? It's not what you think. I went out to do something. All right, you guys go back to your room first. I still have some things to discuss with Moses. Although it was a little awkward, Jiang Hai really didn't do anything wrong. He wasn't afraid of ghosts calling at his door, so after saying it calmly, he looked at Moses, Adams behind the girls. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the girls looked at each other, and then left Jiang Hai's room under Aphrodite's lead. Only Moses, Adams stayed in Jiang Hai's room. He looked at Jiang Hai's serious eyes and knew that there must be something going on. I got some more things, some real things. You see what you can do. Jiang Hai repeatedly confirmed that there was no one else here, and there were no hotel surveillance cameras. Jiang Hai took down the big bag behind him and said with a serious face, "This bag was bought outside after Jiang Hai came back. Otherwise, it would be difficult for him to carry these things back." "What is it?" Looking at Jiang Hai's mysterious look, Moses, Adams asked with some confusion. Under his puzzled gaze, Jiang Hai opened the big bag behind him and carefully took out two things wrapped in newspaper from inside, and carefully put them on the coffee table. Looking at Jiang Hai's careful look, Moses, Adams, who originally wanted to help, couldn't help but sit back down. Looking at these two things, they should be vases. Thinking about the price of the antique vases in Huaxia, he felt that it was better for him to sit down obediently because if they were really antiques, he wouldn't be able to afford it even if he lost his life. This is a good thing I just got. I'm sure it's from the Ming Dynasty, but how do I sell this thing? Slowly taking away the newspaper, two vases appeared in front of Jiang Hai. Although Jiang Hai wanted to take these two vases back and collect them himself, there was a problem. These two vases couldn't get on the plane, because Jiang Hai didn't bring these things when he came here. If you bought them in Miami, where did you buy them? Do you have an invoice? Do you have a receipt? Did you pay taxes? If you said you picked them up, where did you pick them up? Do you have any witnesses? Is it smuggled? If you want to get on the plane, Jiang Hai has his own plane, so it's much easier. But if you don't have one, it's very troublesome. It was because he figured this out, or maybe because he was paranoid that Jiang Hai didn't choose to go back to sell it, but was ready to sell it here. I'm not very clear about the situation here, but if it's real, we can find an auction house. Those guys will always have a way. When it came to his profession, Moses Adams became serious. He didn't consider the problem that Jiang Hai's porcelain was fake, because although he didn't know what Jiang Hai's background was, it seemed that Jiang Hai had never been deceived in this regard. If he said it was real, then it was real. But to be honest, he didn't know much about porcelain, so he was a little confused. Are we still looking for an auction house? To be honest, Jiang Hai didn't have a good impression of auction houses. Christie's and Sotheby's, for some historical reasons, made Jiang Hai, who had always thought that he was a descendant of the Yellow Emperor, disdain to look for these two companies. In the past, Phillips had deceived him, which made him a little unhappy. But unfortunately, it was said that only after 3 generations of wealth could one be considered a noble. This was because at that time, not only would one have settled down, even one's social network would have been very wide. Unlike the current Jiang Hai, his connections were pitifully narrow. At the very most, he only knew Prawalton among the upper-class people in the United States, and the two were in a cooperative relationship. Of course, if the old man Zhang Dihai was also an American, then he would add one more. However, these two people clearly had nothing to do with connections. What's more, the relationship between Jiang Hai and them was not particularly good. It was to the point that he couldn't trust them to help him sell these priceless treasures. From the looks of it, this seems to be the only way. He touched his chin. Although he didn't want to deal with Phillips again if he wanted to go out, it seemed that this was the only way. As for selling privately to the rich people here, Jiang Hai wasn't that stupid. Those people were the local tyrants here. If the other party wanted to take advantage of him, then Jiang Hai would be in trouble. So after hesitating for a long time, Jiang Hai decided to contact Phillips' people. It wasn't the first time that Philip's people and Jiang Hai cooperated. When Moses Adams called their headquarters, in less than 2 hours, the local people of Philip's came over. It was a small team, including 3 appraisal experts and 2 people in charge of negotiating the price. Of course, if everything was negotiated, there would be people in charge of transportation. Jiang Hai didn't care about transportation. Hello, Mr. Jiang Hai. Thank you for trusting Phillips again. The leader of the 5 people who came over seemed to be a Latin American, but he also looked like an Arab. Well, Jiang Hai really couldn't tell which country these people's faces were from, but his English was quite good. Hello, this time these are the things. You can take a look first, and then we can negotiate the price. After Jiang Hai shook hands with this person, he showed the things behind him. In his big bag, it was impossible to only contain these 2 vases. There were a lot of things in that big bag. He got a lot of gold coins, silver coins, and jewelry from the first warehouse. This was because he also wanted to know the value of these things. Jiang Hai didn't take back all the armor in the last warehouse, because the armor itself wasn't small, and Jiang Hai didn't know the price of the armor, so in the end, he only took a skirt back. In this way, a lot of things were placed on the table, and it looked really colorful. Of course. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the person in charge here also nodded to the 3 people behind him. These 3 people also had their own jobs. One of them was a middle-aged man from Huaxia who specialized in appraising porcelain. The other 2 were white people. One specialized in appraising gems, and the other specialized in appraising deposits and silver coins. They were also people who came based on Jiang Hai's things. These people were very professional. After getting Jiang Hai's permission, they began to study their own things. After about an hour, these people put down the things in their hands and whispered to the 2 people in charge for a while. Then the 2 people also knew the specific situation and sat opposite Jiang Hai. Mr. Jiang Hai, congratulations. These things are all real. Do you want to sell them? Looking at Jiang Hai, the person in charge here said very seriously. Hearing this, Jiang Hai nodded. Why would he look for them if he didn't want to sell them? Seeing that Jiang Hai agreed, the person here also took out a piece of paper and started to quote according to the things on it. If you want to sell, our company also told us that we don't need to play word games with you, so I'll just quote directly. Our company offers $1 million for your pair of blue and white porcelain vases, $1,000 for each gold coin, $300 for each silver coin, $150 for this ruby, $120,000 for this sapphire. But before he finished, Jiang Hai interrupted him. Wait, how much is this pair of blue and white porcelain vases? For Jiang Hai, the most expensive blue and white porcelain was naturally the Yuan dynasty blue and white porcelain, but the Ming dynasty blue and white porcelain was also quite valuable. What did this guy mean? A pair of Dragon Phoenix Ming Dynasty blue and white porcelain vases was only worth $1 million? Was he playing with him? Seeing Jiang Hai's confusion, the appraiser said, Mr. Jiang, your vases are real, but that's all they're worth. Chapter 295. The appraiser spoke in Chinese to Jiang Hai, and Jiang Hai understood what he was saying, but he still found it hard to believe. Didn't they say that blue and white porcelain was extremely expensive? Why was there such a huge discrepancy between the price of this toy and the price in his heart? In his opinion, this set of porcelain could be sold for 20 or 30 million, even if it couldn't be sold for hundreds of millions of dollars. But what the hell was this 1 million yuan? Did these guys think that he didn't know anything? The middle-aged man noticed the dissatisfaction on Jiang Hai's face, so he started to explain to Jiang Hai, Mr. Jiang, this set of porcelain is indeed from the Ming Dynasty, and it's well preserved. It's from the Wanli period of the Ming Dynasty, but because it's from the Wanli period, it's not worth much. Looking at Jiang Hai, the middle-aged man began to explain to Jiang Hai that porcelain was worth a lot of money. But in ancient times, porcelain was even more valuable. It was impossible for the Chinese to not know this, especially when porcelain was sold to the West. It was truly priceless. This point was very tempting to the Chinese merchants in China. But in that era, there was a clear prohibition, and rulers were not allowed to go out to sea. If they couldn't go, they could only rely on those Western merchants to sell these things. China's maritime ban had existed since ancient times. Almost all Huaxia people regarded the Song dynasty as the best era. In fact, there was a maritime ban in the Song dynasty. In the history of the Song dynasty, it was recorded in Taizong's annals. It said that in the second year of Yongxi 985, in September, Zhao Guangyi banned merchants from the sea. This represented the Song dynasty. From the beginning, merchants were not allowed to go out to sea. Later on, sea merchants might go secretly, but at least they didn't dare to do it openly. Later on in the Yuan dynasty, the people of the Yuan dynasty didn't know anything about the navy. Just like the burden in Crosstalk now, Mongolia, the commander of the navy, where did the sea come from? So in the Yuan dynasty, the maritime ban was very strong. Later on in the Ming dynasty, it was naturally stronger. When Zhu Di was still in power, he had sent Zheng He to the west. However, after Zheng He came back, he told Zhu Di that the west was rich in resources, but they were poor. They did not have any strategic reserves such as gold, silver, and copper. The fruits and sugarcane that they produced were also useless to Huaxia. In that era, the common people could not afford to eat sweets, but the high officials and nobles ate sweets. Naturally, they could use beets to make sweets. There was also the consideration of guarding against the pirates in Japan. That was why they went into seclusion. During the Qing dynasty, they had reached a peak. However, although they were not allowed to go out to sea, the people in the court and the merchants were not fools. They didn't want to be sea merchants, but these foreigners came to buy their porcelain. Naturally, they wouldn't be polite. Therefore, during the Wanli dynasty, he saw a business opportunity in this. At that time, the imperial court had abolished the sea ban. Also, he specially made a foreign trade blue and white porcelain for these Western merchants. The quality was naturally about the same as the Chinese porcelain. It was slightly worse than the ones for the inner palace, but it was still better than the ones in the merchant's house. Because the porcelain was sold to foreigners, there were dragons, immortals, phoenixes, kirans, etc. It was not taboo, but the price was naturally different. This kind of porcelain was very common in the Wanli dynasty and Longqing dynasty. It was because of the foreign trade system that Huaxia's porcelain was sold all over the world in that era. Now that 400 years had passed, these porcelains had become antiques, but there was a problem. That was, there were too many of these porcelains. Almost any auction house in the country had such porcelains, and the fake ones might be more expensive than the real ones. In China, to be honest, a single plum bottle like yours is sold for about 2 million to 5 million renminbi. If you don't believe me, you can check it yourself. You are also Chinese, and you have such power in the United States. I think it's not troublesome for you to check the price in China. The reason why I asked for more than 6 million renminbi and 1 million renminbi is mainly because you have a pair, so on the basis of multiplying the price by 2, I increased the price by more than 1 million. Seeing that he had explained it to Zhang Hai clearly, the middle-aged man here was a little embarrassed. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai hesitated for a moment. Put these 2 bottles here first, let's talk about other things first. Although he was a little convinced now, he still wanted to ask about China. While texting Fu Yuan and the others, Zhang Hai said to the person on the other side. The person on the other side didn't care when he heard Zhang Hai's words. A bottle worth 1 million RMB was not a treasure for them, so they continued to quote the price. At this time, Su Wei and the others in China also sent a message back to Zhang Hai. He told Zhang Hai that what the man said was indeed true. A porcelain bottle from the Wanli period was indeed worth a lot of money. A porcelain bottle was enough to buy a house in the capital's 5th Ring Road, but it was impossible to add more than that. For an ordinary person, several million RMB was a lot of money, but for Zhang Hai, it was really a bit of a loss. Just as he finished asking, the person on the other side also quoted the full price for the pile of things. Zhang Hai's 2 bottles were only worth 1 million RMB, and the pile of money and jewelry that he didn't care about was worth 3 million renminbi in total. This made Zhang Hai feel a little helpless, and he shook his head with a bitter smile. It was a consolation prize after all. These jewels took up less than 1% of the space in that cabin at most. If these were worth 3 million renminbi, then the ship's worth of jewels would be worth 2 or 300 million RMB when they went back. This time, it wasn't a waste of effort. Since they had already negotiated, Zhang Hai didn't lower the price, and the other side gave a very honest price. Zhang Hai directly sold the jewels and the pair of porcelain bottles, and the 3 million renminbi was directly transferred to Zhang Hai's account. These people immediately contacted the headquarters. Although 3 million RMB worth of jewels wasn't very high, it was still quite valuable. At least, they couldn't afford it, so it was best to inform the company's security to come and get it. Watching them wrap these things up one by one, Zhang Hai suddenly saw the dress he had been putting in the distance. "Hey, didn't you see this?" Walking over and picking up the dress, Zhang Hai asked with some surprise. "This is also a collection?" Looking at this metal dress that seemed to have just been made, a few people couldn't help but ask with some doubts. Of course, these things were collected together. This thing has a history of nearly 400 years. Hearing these people's doubts, Zhang Hai said naturally, but he was just saying. The pair of porcelain bottles he was particularly interested in didn't sell for a price. This set of armor that didn't seem to be worn by humans at all, what price could it be sold for? But as the saying goes, a thief doesn't leave empty-handed. Bah, he's not a thief, and he won't leave empty-handed anyway. This thing was placed at the bottom of the sea. If it could be sold for money, it would be great, even if it was only worth a few 100,000. Nearly 400 years? This is a battle dress? Hearing Zhang Hai's words, a white man who didn't care about it suddenly widened his eyes. He immediately took the dress and looked at it carefully. The original position of the dress was far away from them. At first, these people thought that this was an ashtray that was deliberately made old, but now when Zhang Hai said it, their eyes lit up. The time to study this battle dress was much more than the time to study other things. Nearly 2 hours. When the security guards came, they specially asked these people to bring some new research equipment over. They worked there until 3:00 in the afternoon. The 3 people here raised their heads. While their faces were covered with sweat, there was also a trace of joy and excitement. "Mr. Zhang Hai, I don't know if the other matching armor of this battle dress is in your hands, or only this battle dress." After the 3 people whispered to their leader, the man who didn't know whether he was from Latin America or the Middle East couldn't help but be stunned. He then respectfully came in front of Zhang Hai and asked seriously to Zhang Hai, "Oh, I have a set, but I put it somewhere else." When he heard this person's words, Zhang Hai was also stunned. Is this battle dress very valuable? Therefore, his attitude, which was originally not too concerned, instantly changed at this moment. If my team didn't guess wrong, then this set of battle armor should have been specially made by Philip III. It's his exclusive battle armor. Moreover, it's a new set of battle armor. The man looked at Zhang Hai and said with a serious expression, "Wait, what Philip or Sirloin, I don't care. This set of armor, is it very valuable?" Hearing that this person seemed to want to give a long explanation about Philip III, Zhang Hai immediately stretched out his hand and stopped him. At the beginning, he told Zhang Hai about the Wanli year. Zhang Hai might be interested in listening. However, when he talked about the history of Europe, Zhang Hai didn't have the mood to listen. He directly interrupted him and asked the question he was most concerned about. "This is not a matter of money. Well, business is business. If you decide to sell this item, it is estimated that it will be difficult for our company to pay for it alone. So, in my opinion, you should auction it. Because when the time comes, even if you deduct the tax, you will earn much more than we think." Looking at Zhang Hai, the man's eyes were about to burst into flames. It was obvious that this was a huge sum of money. "Can you be more specific?" Squinting his eyes, Zhang Hai asked curiously. To be honest, he really didn't expect that the armor would be so valuable. It was so valuable that Philip didn't dare to accept it privately. This was a bit interesting. "I've checked your transaction records. I'm sorry, but this is also a requirement of our work. We need to check your credibility. If we add up the price of the 2 items you've sold, it's probably worth about half a set of armor." Seeing the serious look on Zhang Hai's face, this person also spoke in a serious tone. He wasn't being an alarmist, he was an auctioneer. In such a case, he would only give a low estimate and not a high estimate. This is also his professional quality. Chapter 296. There are quite a few emperors called Philip III. Which one is the one I picked up? On the hotel's computer, Zhang Hai casually flipped through Wikipedia and said to Moses, Adams next to him. However, Moses Adams was not so relaxed at this time. Since Philip's people left, he has been wiping his sweat. Indeed, he was shocked by Zhang Hai. He never thought that Zhang Hai would have Philip III's armor. The so-called Philip III has a lot of introductions on the internet, but there are only 5 main monarchs. The king of the Agid dynasty in the Macedonian period, the king of the Capet dynasty in France, the king of the Evreux dynasty, and a duke of the Burgundy-Valois dynasty, but the only one that can be matched is the king of the Spanish Habsburg dynasty. According to the words of the expert, this Philip III's armor should be new. Zhang Hai combined the historical background and political situation at that time, and he probably guessed that it should be like this. The original Europeans occupied America mainly to plunder the population and resources here to build gold mines. The gold mines in America are naturally more than those in Europe. Of course, Asia also has a lot, but for the Europeans in the 16th century, they can't beat the Asians. They occupied this place and mined the gold, so naturally, they wanted to give it to the Spanish emperor. Directly giving the gold was one thing, but the governor here also wanted to find ways to please the emperor, so he made this armor. At the same time, the merchants who went to Asia also brought back 2 porcelains and sent them together. But they didn't expect that before they could send them, they were taken by pirates. The Habsburg dynasty was once prominent in Europe and once ruled Spain and Portugal. Philip III was the child of Philip II's 4th wife, Archduchess Anna of Austria. When he inherited the throne, Philip III was also a famous Catholic, but unfortunately, he inherited his father's faith, but he didn't inherit his father's talent. He led the Spanish Navy, which was the most powerful at that time, to gradually come to an end. Once, Philip II predicted that his son did not have the ability to manage the empire, and he will be controlled by the palace all his life. Later, it was proven that if Philip II did not become an emperor, he would not starve to death even if he became a prophet. As it turned out, Philip III was not a very controversial person because he was rotten to the end. He had always liked the playful life of the court, and he squandered a lot of money on it. He almost destroyed the entire empire. After his good fortune in 1621, he left a tattered Spain to his successor. It could be said that he was a father who cheated his son. There was no other father who could compare to him. Perhaps his only political achievement was the marriage of his eldest daughter to Louis XIII and the birth of Louis XIV, one of the greatest kings of France, but nothing else. Zhang Hai didn't care if this guy was dead or alive. His reputation had nothing to do with him. However, he was very interested in this set of armor. After these people left, Zhang Hai was thinking about how to get these treasures out. If it was like last night, running back and forth was really tiring, and the gains did not make up for the losses. So, after thinking about it for a long time, Zhang Hai felt that he could drive a boat directly. Of course, an ordinary boat would definitely not work. A fishing boat would attract too much attention. After all, there were not many fish in that sea area. If a fishing boat was not enough, then he could only use a yacht. It was impossible for him to rent a yacht to others. If there were any surveillance cameras or something like that, then Zhang Hai would be in trouble. So, after thinking about it, the only feasible thing was to buy a yacht. Fortunately, this thing was very big, so it was naturally very expensive. However, if the size was not too big, then it was not too big. After checking casually, there were not many places in Miami that sold other things, but there were a lot of places that sold yachts. Just like a certain place in China, there were also regular gatherings similar to the sea and the sky. Naturally, there were many places that sold yachts like this. Zhang Hai checked and found a lot of them. Well, I've decided. I'll buy a yacht and go out to sea to play. At night, I'll live on the sea. At night, I'll go into the water and do a little bit of work. After I'm done here, I'll drive the yacht back to Boston. After all, I'm a billionaire, and the most luxurious yacht is a fishing boat. I'm a little embarrassed. Looking at the yachts on the computer screen in front of him, Zhang Hai calculated in his heart. Behind Zhang Hai, Moses Adams was still calculating how much money it was. After dinner, Zhang Hai returned to his room. First, he called to ask how much money he had in his bank card. When Zhang Hai made this card, he had a total of $330 million. Later, he spent $280 million to buy the manor. The remaining $50 million had been squandered for the past half a year. Buying cars, renovating, buying boats, buying cows, buying fish seedlings, tidying up the wine manor, and paying salaries to AI Dehua and the others. Adding everything together, the initial $50 million was long gone. After all, he had spent tens of millions on cattle and millions on fish seedlings. Although the car was a small sum, it was still a few $1,000,000. In addition, he had to pay taxes, go to the New York Beef Show, and do a series of other things. The $50 million had long been gone. If it weren't for the millions he had earned from selling fish and discovering gold coins, he might have gone bankrupt. Fortunately, he had survived the worst period of his life. Zhang Hai now had a balance of 273145559 in his Centurion card. 37. $10 million was a deposit from Prawalton, which meant that she had accepted all of Zhang Hai's cattle. If she didn't take them all in half a year, the $10 million would belong to Zhang Hai. Of course, the $10 million would still belong to Zhang Hai, but it would still be the cattle's money. Another $5 million was from Zhang Dihai, Grandpa Zhang. Friends were friends, and business was business. He had everything he needed. Another $5 million was from Qi Li. Like Grandpa Zhang, the $20 million was the deposit for his cattle. As for the remaining $7 million, $4 million was all he had, and $3 million was just transferred today. $27 million seemed a lot, but Zhang Hai didn't care too much about it. After all, if he sold more than 10,000 cattle, he would have to sell them at least 50 times more. That was his net worth. However, he still had to wait for all the cattle to be sold. There was still half a year, but he didn't have to wait for the auction this time. If that set of armor could really be sold for a sky-high price of $1 billion, even if he had to pay 35% of the tax, Zhang Hai could still get 65% of it back. That would be $650 million. In an instant, his slightly tight life would become rich. Thinking of this, Zhang Hai's heart, which was already very hot, was burning again. It's decided. That's it. Zhang Hai said seriously as he patted his bed. After getting up the next morning, Zhang Hai announced this to everyone. Because he felt that it was a little boring to play on land, he was going to buy a yacht and then go to the sea to play. But this time, in order to keep it a secret, only 8 girls, including Zhang Hai, Delina, Marion, and Aphrodite, would go to sea. Moses Adams was not among them. Moses Adams didn't care about this, although he knew that he hadn't gained Zhang Hai's 100% trust. This time, Zhang Hai was going to sea to get back the goods he had mentioned. Of course, he wouldn't know the location, but it was good enough that Zhang Hai revealed this information to him. What's more, Zhang Hai would use him in the auction later. He would continue to stay in Miami to eat, drink, and play. His life was wonderful. At the same time, when Zhang Hai went to sea, he had another task. Although the place where Zhang Hai went to sea this time was not far, if he encountered any danger, it would be very troublesome, so he needed to prepare weapons for Zhang Hai. When Moses Adams was busy, Zhang Hai also took a group of girls around him to the most famous yacht fair in Miami. When their car was parked in the parking lot, even Zhang Hai wanted to curse. What was a luxury car fair? This was it. In the parking lot, there were luxury cars everywhere at this time. Looking around, what was a Lamborghini, which was a Ferrari, Porsche, Bugatti, Bentley, Aston Martin, Alfa Romeo, Rolls-Royce, Maybach, and so on. Although some of the cars were only equipped with 13 sharp weapons, they were not as good as the cars in Zhang Hai's garage. But these cars were not bad. Driving a BMW 7 Series or a Mercedes-Benz S Series here was really embarrassing. As for the Japanese cars, they were not allowed to enter at all. The only exception may be Lexus. Seeing Zhang Hai and his group get out of the car, Many young people who were gathered in the distance and bragging couldn't help but focus their eyes on them. Some of them were even bold enough to whistle. Perhaps in their eyes, Aphrodite and the other girls were probably peripheral girls. After all, they were dressed rather well, but they were far from being able to walk around here. Besides, even if they were really rich girls, it wasn't as if they couldn't hook up with them. Looking at the faces of these guys, Zhang Hai looked at them with disdain. These guys were showing off, he endured it. But if they dared to show off, then he didn't mind letting them know why the flowers were so red. He had a bad temper. Chapter 297. Miami was worthy of its reputation as the city of sin and God's reception room. Zhang Hai led Aphrodite and the others from the parking lot into the harbor in front of them and saw a completely different scene. It was just a door. Outside the door was the normal world, but inside the door was another world, the world of the rich. Zhang Hai looked around and saw that at this time, in a small harbor specially opened in the harbor of Miami, countless yachts were docked there. Unlike the small boats in China that dared to call themselves yachts, the yachts here were all very large. The small ones were more than 30 meters long, with 2 or 3 floors, so people could clearly distinguish them from fishing boats and the like at a glance. Zhang Hai's target was these guys. In front of these yachts, in addition to some muscular men acting as the bodyguards of the yachts, there were more men. There were also some women wearing very revealing clothes. These women were all quite young. Basically, they were in their 20s, with all kinds of skin colors and styles, but all of them had delicate faces and perfect figures. After all, these girls counted on these things to make a living. Some of these women were socialites, but most of them were models. They were different from those in China, who dared to call themselves otaku goddesses on the internet after taking a few sets of photos. These models were all real. Every year, they flew all over the world to walk on the runway, but the salary of a model was not as good as imagined. It was not a bad choice to marry a diamond old man when they were the youngest and most beautiful. Of course, if it was just one night or finding a lover, they had to think about it. These girls were not a one-time deal. Looking at their gorgeously dressed appearance, if you wanted to dump them, you would have to pay a piece of meat. At this time, they gathered in groups of 3 or 5 in front of some yachts or some old men to show themselves. Of course, the bigger the yacht, the more people gathered. Of course, where there were more people, there was more competition, and the chances of being selected were much lower. Therefore, some women who were not very good conditions and were a little older, but were still very beautiful, chose small yachts. Even if they could not catch a few $1 billion, it was still a good choice to catch a few tens of millions. In front of these yachts, there were also many men. Some of these men were young, but most of them were not young. Men in their 30s, 40s, and even the most mainstream ones were men in their 50s or 60s. They mingled among the hot girls, taking advantage of them and telling dirty jokes, causing the girls to grumble. Originally, Aphrodite and the others were very conspicuous outside, but after entering this place, Aphrodite and the others were not so conspicuous. After all, their pretty faces didn't have much of an advantage here. Compared to a group of people with 30 points, a 90-point face was naturally as beautiful as a fairy. However, if the people around her were all in the 70s or 80s, then it wouldn't be too eye-catching. Moreover, they were dressed very conservatively. Of course, this was based on the current conditions here. "Sir, what can I do for you?" Just as Zhang Hai and the others walked in, 2 men wearing tight black vests at the door came over. These 2 guys were black, both with big bald heads. The vests were tight on their muscles, looking very fierce, giving people an inexplicable sense of oppression. "I'm here to buy a yacht." Looking at the yachts in front of him, Zhang Hai was thinking about what to buy. "Sir, where is your invitation letter?" Hearing Zhang Hai casually say that he wanted to buy a yacht, the black man couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. Because now the whole world knows that Huaxia people are rich, but this is not a place where people can casually enter. "I don't have that kind of thing. Is this okay?" Zhang Hai didn't make things difficult for these security guards, but directly showed his black gold card. Sometimes, this thing is the most symbolic existence. If someone can afford it, then they are not ordinary people. "Oh, I'm sorry to disturb you, sir. You are the owner inside. Do you need a shopping guide?" Seeing Jiang Hai's black gold card, the security guard was not inexperienced. He immediately retreated to the side respectfully. He couldn't afford to offend this person. Yes, call one for me. Hearing this person's words, Jiang Hai also nodded. He didn't know how to choose. Seeing that Jiang Hai seemed to really want to buy a yacht, the security guard here immediately said, "Please wait a moment." After waiting for about 5 minutes, a figure quickly ran over from afar. This figure was a woman who looked to be 26 or 27 years old. She was a standard blonde American. She was not ugly, with slightly curly hair tied into a ponytail behind her head. She also wore a pair of black glasses on her face. He was wearing a white shirt on his upper body, but the top 3 buttons of this shirt were not fastened. Originally, when he stood on the ground, he could see a huge ravine. Now that he was running, it was really a bit of a reversal of 3 views. She wore a short skirt that was just short enough to cover the most important part of her body, and a pair of black high heels. He had to admit that this woman should have practiced. The high heels were about 10 centimeters high, but she could still run. "Hello, sir. Are you the one who wants to buy a yacht?" "I am your shopping guide. My name is Jennifer." The girl ran all the way to Jiang Hai and deliberately put her hands on her knees. She bent down so that Jiang Hai could pay attention to this pair of existences that could topple his worldview. After looking at them for more than 10 seconds, the girl didn't seem to notice at all. At this time, she slowly stood up and said with a smile. But as soon as she raised her head, she saw Aphrodite and the others beside Jiang Hai shooting their gazes at her like sharp arrows. Except for Delina and Marion, who maintained an indifferent state, they clearly saw this woman's movements. However, they couldn't do anything to Jiang Hai, so they could only secretly guard against this guy. However, this guy didn't care about the hostility of Aphrodite and the others. Selling a yacht was actually similar to selling a car or a house. One must know that the commission of this kind of thing is also very high. It can make a lot of money. So what's wrong with selling one's body? Cough. "Oh, hello, my surname is Jiang. Let's go first. You can introduce me to the one I like." Perhaps feeling the awkward atmosphere in the air, Jiang Hai smiled and walked forward. Jennifer also smiled and walked to Jiang Hai's side, leading Jiang Hai to the yachts in the distance. It is said that the richest people play with yachts. Originally, Jiang Hai didn't care about it, but after taking a closer look, he found it to be true. How expensive can the most expensive car be? Of course, it's not limited edition or made of gold. It's the kind of car that can be bought with money. Some people say that it's a gold supercar, a Rolls-Royce Silver Ghost, a Lamborghini Hermes, etc. But in fact, these 3 cars are all nonsense, especially the last one. It's just a concept car. It hasn't even been produced. How can it be worth 380 million renminbi? Currently, the most expensive car in the market is the Bugatti series, and it's a Veyron convertible. It's about 40 million renminbi. Converted to USD, it's about 7 million renminbi. Of course, there might be other cars that are more expensive than this one, but it's the best car that can be bought. Planes are more expensive than cars. If a plane is bought well and has good configuration, 20 to 30 million renminbi will be more than 100 million renminbi. The most expensive ones could even reach 100 million yuan. However, 100 million yuan was already quite good. It might not be the best, but it was still the best. But if it's a yacht, well, 100 million renminbi is just the starting line. Of course, we're talking about dollars here. It wouldn't be interesting if we were talking about dollars. The yachts that Jiang Hai and the others were looking at were arranged in alphabetical order. The first one was Azima's brand, a top Italian yacht brand. This year, they were mainly promoting a small yacht, Azimut 95, with a price of $9 million. This was a very low configuration. If you want a good one, it would cost $12 million. Don't look at the price because this yacht was really small, 97 feet. This is a unit of length for yachts, feet converted to meters. The captain was less than 30 meters. Are you kidding? Jiang Hai is only looking at the yacht. Even 30 meters is too big for him. Jiang Hai had bragged so much just now. All the yachts with more than 100 million renminbi are big yachts. A 30-meter yacht is too big for Jiang Hai. After all, he only has 27 million renminbi in total. Behind Asimo are the French brand Bonadeur and Guida's BV. BV is similar to Asimo. They are all small yachts with a length of about 30 meters. There are only 5 types of yachts, and all of them are priced at more than 10 million renminbi. The Germans' products were very sturdy. This was something they had in common, but the price they sold them at was also unusually high. But compared to BV, Bonadeur's yachts are much cheaper. They also have bigger yachts with a length of more than 30 meters. But most of them are small boats, and some are even 6 to 7 meters long. They are as big as the yachts in China. But the appearance and equipment of these yachts are different. They're more like speedboats than yachts. Zhang Hai looked at a few larger yachts, that is 11 or 12 meters long double-decker yachts, which were like this. It really wasn't that expensive. The $1.5 million for a 12-meter room was all well-equipped, including GPS, leather upholstery, and so on. There were 3 guest rooms in total, 1 master bedroom, 2 guest bedrooms, and a lounge that could be used for a party. It's not a problem to accommodate a dozen people. To be honest, this is what Zhang Hai wants to buy. The other 11-meter yacht is only 860,000 renminbi. The only problem is that the bedroom is a little small. Chapter 298. Zhang Hai looked very generous at times, but he was actually quite stingy at other times. He didn't care about small amounts of money. Just like when he was earning 3,000 a month, he didn't care about the 8 or 10 yuan. Now that he was rich, earning more than 1 billion a year, he didn't care about 3,000 or 5,000, but that didn't mean he didn't care about tens of millions. The yacht that cost more than 10 million was beautiful, but to be honest, Zhang Hai felt a little guilty about it. Compared to the yacht that cost more than 10 million, he felt that the yacht that cost more than 1 million was not bad. However, although Zhang Hai thought so, he didn't say it out loud. Instead, he continued to walk forward with the woman in front of him. After walking past the shipyards that started with B, they came to the ones that started with C. There were only 2 brands here. One was a local American brand, Corona. This company was originally established in Wellington, Illinois. It was really a small shipyard back then. The place where the company installed the interior of the yacht was an empty gym in a school. It was just established in 1991, but it had already gained some fame in the past 20 years. This shipyard specialized in selling small boats. Rather than yachts, it was better to say that they were speedboats. The biggest one was only about 10 meters long, and the price was quite cheap. It belonged to the American price range. An 8-person boat about 7 meters long only cost $120,000, and they were all well decorated. They could be driven away directly after refueling. Zhang Hai didn't care about this level of yacht. The other one that started with C was Italy's Calanci, which was a little bigger than Corona. However, it was limited, and Zhang Hai didn't really like it. As they walked forward, they came to the ones that started with D. However, once they got closer, Zhang Hai was a little surprised, because the boats that started with D made Zhang Hai a little confused. DHC. Looking at the row of yachts in front of him, Zhang Hai asked with some doubts. Yes, this is a boat made by Huaxia's Red Double Happiness Shipyard, and it sells quite well here. It's a small yacht, and the largest one is 26 feet, nearly 8 meters, long. The freshwater tank can hold 2,000 liters, and the fuel tank can hold 4,000 liters. It's a very good type, and the price is also very good. The French Bonadeur you saw just now is about the same size as this one, and it costs about $700,000. However, this boat costs $550,000, so it can be said that it's a bargain. Seeing that Zhang Hai was interested in this brand, the shopping guide here immediately spoke. However, Zhang Hai just chuckled. To be honest, if he could, he was still willing to support domestic products. Anyone who lived in the country would know what the red double jaw was. That's for making table tennis, okay? Is the quality of table tennis the same as yachts? This time, Zhang Hai bought this boat only to fish for treasures. However, he didn't say that he would just throw it away after fishing for treasures. After all, he still had to drive back to Boston. Therefore, Zhang Hai just took a look and left. The shopping guide here was very good at reading people's expressions. When he saw Jiang Hai's expression, he knew that he had some understanding of red double happiness, so he didn't say anything more. Next to red double happiness, there was also a shipyard that started with D. However, the boats here were obviously a little different from the ones in front. The boats here were very beautiful, really beautiful. Compared to the boats next to it, the boats here were like ordinary cars and concept cars. They were all cars, but they were particularly attractive at first glance. Basically, all the boats had 1.5 floors, which meant that there was a floor above the deck, and there was another floor below the deck. The whole boat was streamlined, and it looked like it could run very fast on the sea. The postmodern feeling was very cool. This is Della Pita, a shipyard with half a century of shipbuilding technology. It has very good technology. It can be said that in terms of technology, the boats in this shipyard are the best among all the boats here. However, the price-performance ratio is also the lowest. For example, the largest DP-70, which is only 92 feet long, is sold for $2 million. It's not worth it. Seeing Jiang Hai's gaze, the shopping guide introduced the boat. To be honest, she also liked this boat very much, but it was indeed not very suitable. When Jiang Hai heard the price, he couldn't help but twitch his mouth and continue walking. After D, it was E, and after E it was F. 26 letters weren't that many, so Jiang Hai quickly finished looking through them. Among the hundreds of large and small yachts here, Jiang Hai only took a fancy to a few brands. After all, Jiang Hai didn't buy this boat for fun. He still had work to do. Therefore, this boat couldn't be too big. He could easily drive it himself, or he could ask Aphrodite and the others to help. This limited the length. For example, the boats from brands like Fei Emperor Star and Uzia couldn't do. They were too big. Ordinary boats wouldn't do either. They were too small. Jiang Hai also wouldn't choose some boats that weren't expensive. In the end, with the help of the shopping guide, Jiang Hai chose a total of 6 boat types. The first model was the White Rabbit yacht from the Evolution shipyard. It had a total length of 61.4 feet, 18.7 meters, a total width of 15.4 feet, 4.7 meters, a freshwater storage of 15,000 liters, and a fuel storage of 94,500 liters. It was well equipped, but it was a little long. The second was the Heesun, 55M. This one was 54.99 feet, 16 meters long. It had 3 floors, 30,000 liters of fresh water, and 125,000 liters of fuel. Its endurance was much better than the first model, but the first model was streamlined and ran fast. This one was slightly slower. At the same time, there were a lot of rooms. The whole boat had a total of 17 rooms. Jiang Hai and the others naturally couldn't live in them. However, Jiang Hai's favorite was the LSX 120 from a shipyard called Salaza. This boat wasn't long, only 23 feet, which was about 10 meters, but it was really beautiful. The whole boat was built like a supercar. It was quite beautiful. There were corners, but the problem was that it was too small. If he bought it in Boston and went back to the manor to show off, Jiang Hai might buy one. However, in the current situation, Jiang Hai really didn't want to buy one. But he remembered it. He would buy it when he had time in the future. This boat was really to his liking. It was very beautiful. In addition to these 3 boats, according to Jiang Hai's requirements, the most recommended boat was the Sunbird. The boats developed by the Sunbird basically met Jiang Hai's requirements. It was about 20 meters in size, divided into 3 floors, and had many rooms. Most importantly, it was easy to drive. 2 people could drive the boat. One person was responsible for driving the boat, and the other person just had to watch and throw the rope. The entire ship had everything. It was specially prepared for those single men who like to go out alone or take a group of girls out to play. It was very much in line with Jiang Hai's positioning. Jiang Hai didn't go out to play. It was also because of this. This shipyard produced many boats, but the ones recommended to Jiang Hai were the Sao Paulo and Rafael. The Sao Paulo had 2 boats. The first was a 118-foot boat with a length of 35.9 feet, 11 meters. It was a little small, and Zhang Hai couldn't afford it. The second was a 138-foot boat with a length of 41.58 feet, 12.6 meters. It had 3 floors and a total of 8 rooms. This was very suitable for Zhang Hai's requirements. There was also Raphael's boat, which had a length of 45.7 feet, 14 meters. It was about the same size, but it only had 2 floors. But this one had a more postmodern feel. It looked very beautiful. The whole boat was airtight, and it looked like a fish. Although it wasn't as beautiful as Zara's boat, it had a strong metallic feel and strong edges. This boat looked very ostentatious, which was very suitable for Zhang Hai's requirements. But at the same time, it had a good appearance, so it naturally wasn't cheap. According to your requirements, I can give you a minimum of $35 million for this boat. If it's a 138-foot Sao Paulo boat, it'll be $45 million. Looking at Zhang Hai, Jennifer whispered to Zhang Hai, as if she was afraid that others would hear her. At this time, Zhang Hai was still hesitating. At first, he thought that the size of the ship was different, so the calculation was different. But now he realized that there was actually a big difference. In fact, yachts were indeed calculated according to their length. Yachts of 6, 7, or 8 meters rarely cost more than $1 million. Even for some very famous brands, yachts of this length were basically between $1 and $1.5 million. Of course, apart from some power sailboats, yachts were indeed very expensive. As for the boats between 10 meters and 15 meters, the price was uncertain. The cheapest boats were more than 1 million yuan. The 12 meters and 11 meters boats, like the French brand, were more than 1 million yuan. But the 13 meters and 14 meters boats could be sold for more than 2 million yuan or 3 million yuan. The boats between 15 meters and 20 meters could be sold for even higher prices. Heezen's yacht, 16 meters, was sold for $78 million. White Rabbit, more than 18 meters, was sold for $25 million. But after all, other people's yachts were indeed big. But this Raphael quietly asked for more than $5 million. Zhang Hai was a little nervous. If his $1 billion came into his account now, he would buy it. But the problem was that his money hadn't come into his account yet, so he was really reluctant to spend it. Seeing Zhang Hai's slightly tangled look, Jennifer didn't urge him. After all, it's a deal of millions of dollars. Even if he's rich, he still has to think about it carefully, especially when Zhang Hai doesn't seem to be very old. In Jennifer's opinion, Zhang Hai was probably a rich second-generation heir who took his family's money. He looked like he was almost 30 years old. It was impossible for him to spend money as recklessly as he did when he was in his early 20s or 17 or 18 years old. He had to think carefully about whether the money was worth it or not. At this time, it was only right to stay quiet. As for Aphrodite and the others, they were already speechless, because they didn't know what to say. These millions of dollars were already beyond what they could bear. They didn't understand why Zhang Hai wanted to buy this thing, but since it was Zhang Hai's decision, they couldn't say anything. At least in their opinion, these yachts were no different from the first boats. Chapter 299. Okay, I'll take it. After hesitating for about 5 minutes, Zhang Hai gritted his teeth and stomped his feet. He couldn't bear to part with his wife. Well, he really couldn't bear to part with his wife, but it wasn't Chile, but no matter what, he would still need to sail these ships in the future. Now, he would treat it as an investment. These ships would look very good in the future. Moreover, if his armor were to be sold for a good price, then he would be able to make a lot of money. Okay, I'll handle it for you now. After hearing Zhang Hai's hesitation, he clenched his teeth and agreed. Jennifer's eyes couldn't help but light up. It seems that this guy really doesn't lack money. It was said that Huaxia people were rich recently, but she hadn't seen much of it. After all, it was located on the East Coast. But now, Zhang Hai's straightforwardness had left a deep impression on her. It seems that Huaxia people are really rich. Hurry up, I don't know how long I can keep this up. Hearing Jennifer's words, Zhang Hai took a deep breath and handed over his Centurion black gold card. He tried his best not to look at it. It's too painful for him to do so. Okay, please wait a moment. After receiving Jiang Hai's black gold card, Jennifer immediately took the walkie-talkie to the side and began to talk to the people over there. Seeing that she was obviously avoiding everyone, Jiang Hai didn't want to eavesdrop. He just stood there and looked at the huge yacht in front of him. He couldn't help but sigh with emotion. Raphael, such a big name. I hope the ship is also a good one. At least, I won't regret it. Just as Jiang Hai was looking at the ship in front of him in a daze, a group of people suddenly came from a distance. The leader of these people was also a shopping guide, but she wasn't a beauty. Instead, she was a middle-aged man. This guy was a little bald, and he was wearing a suit on such a hot day in Miami. Zhao Yu had to admit that he was also a master. At this time, this guy's face was full of smiles, and he was kneeling and licking the man beside him. And the man beside him did have the need to kneel down and lick his boots, because this man was not an American. Instead, he was obviously an Arabian. He had yellow skin, big eyes, and a mustache. He was wearing a white coat, which was also a traditional Arabian costume. In the Arab world, this was the mainstream way of dressing. Suits and the like were not very common in the Arab world. Beside this person, there were 4 big men. At a glance, one could tell that they were bodyguards. At the same time, in the middle of these 4 people, there were 3 women. Their bodies were wrapped in thick black gauze. This was also the traditional Arabian dress. Under the lead of the Mediterranean man, this group of people slowly walked to the ship in front of Jiang Hai. Dear Mr. Defayman Vihar Muhammad bin Rashid Al Maktoum, this is the ship I just told you about. Does the appearance meet your requirements? Although it's a little short for you, it's the best choice if you just want to take your wives and concubines out. This ship is really selling well, and now there's only one left. Standing in front of Jiang Hai, the Mediterranean man explained to the Arab tycoon beside him with a flattering smile. Originally, although they were a bit of an eyesore, Jiang Hai also knew that he couldn't afford to provoke an Arab tycoon, so he didn't care. He wasn't a person with 13 points. He didn't care about crashing into cars, so he naturally wouldn't care about crashing into a yacht. However, it seemed that the yacht they had their eyes on was his. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but frown and take a step forward. As soon as he moved, the 4 bodyguards beside the Arab tycoon reacted at the same time and looked at Jiang Hai with vigilance. In an instant, Jiang Hai's sensitive senses sensed the aura from these people. It was a fierce aura. If the 4 bodyguards that Jiang Hai encountered on Miami Beach were wolves, then these 4 were lions. These 4 fellows were like 4 lions. Whether it was in terms of experience or the amount of blood they could see, they were superior to them in every aspect. Although I don't want to disturb you, if this is really the last yacht, I think you might have come in vain. Unfortunately, for lions couldn't beat a dragon, so Jiang Hai didn't care about their aura at all. He continued to take a step forward and said to the shopping guide in front of him and the Arab man in front of him,
"What do you mean by that?"
Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the shopping guide here couldn't help but be a little puzzled. He glanced at Jiang Hai. Although he knew that Huaxia people were very rich, it was obvious that the Huaxia people's money was not as rich as the Arab tycoon, especially the one beside him. To be precise, he was a member of the royal family. He had to curry favor with him, so when he spoke to Jiang Hai, his tone was not very good. The Arab man here also looked at Jiang Hai with some doubts. What else could it mean? I'll buy this yacht. My shopping guide has already paid over there. Shrugging his shoulders, Jiang Hai said lightly. As Jiang Hai's finger pointed in that direction, several people on this side also saw Jennifer, who was walking back. At this time, Jennifer didn't know the situation here. She just called the supervisor here and confirmed the amount in Jiang Hai's card on the phone. Now the staff is driving a car quickly to deliver the contract. As long as Jiang Hai signs the contract and swipes the card, the yacht will completely belong to him. Now, Jennifer was about to come over to talk to Jiang Hai about this, but she saw that Jiang Hai unknowingly got involved with other people. The most important thing is that she also saw a person she didn't like to see among these people. Jennifer, is this your customer? Seeing Jennifer coming over, the Mediterranean man couldn't help but ask sharply. Yes, Manager Baron. I don't know what's the problem. While respectfully handing the card back to Jiang Hai, Jennifer said to the man indifferently. It can be seen that she is not very afraid of this man. Now I declare that the yacht you sold is invalid. You can take your customer to see other yachts. Hearing Jennifer's disdainful tone, the middle-aged man's face changed, and he said with a tough face, "Oh, I'm sorry, Manager Barron. I have reported this matter to Manager Davis. He is now sending someone here to deliver the contract, and the transaction has been recorded in the computer. You don't have the final say in this matter." Looking at the middle-aged man in front of her, Jennifer smiled. Although this man is a manager and has a higher rank than her, but he is not her direct superior, Jennifer is really not afraid of him. What's more, she is also a gold salesperson. This person does not have the ability to fire her, nor does he have the ability to make things difficult for her. Calling him manager is already giving him face. Americans and Chinese people are indeed a little different, at least in terms of their attitude towards work. They don't care what their superiors think. You used Davis to pressure me? Hearing Jennifer's words, the middle-aged man couldn't help but say with anger in his eyes, "It's not a problem of pressure. We sell yachts, of course. It's first come, first served. There is no problem with this. Even if you call the head office, I will say the same thing." Looking at the middle-aged man in front of her, Jennifer's words were very tough. They sell yachts. Although it's not that they don't open for 3 years, but once they open for 3 years, it's not much different. Jiang Hai's yacht is $35 million. She can at least take 5% of it, which is nearly $300,000. Wanting to take out the money that she had already earned from her pocket was a fool's dream. You. Hearing Jennifer ignore him, the middle-aged man was quite upset, and then he wanted to say something. In his opinion, this Jennifer is really too ignorant. Let's not talk about whether the yacht is profitable or not. An opportunity to please the Middle Eastern tycoon is in front of him. If he doesn't cherish it, he will really be struck by lightning. As for Jiang Hai, he is rich, but he is a huaxia. He can bring him many other things. This woman doesn't even think about it. She is really stupid. Well, Mr. Barron, I think this lady is right about one thing. Seeing that Barron was about to explode, Jiang Hai was also ready to fight. Although he is not as rich as the Middle Eastern tycoon, he still likes to make a big deal out of this. But just as he was getting ready to fight, the Middle Eastern tycoon suddenly spoke. "Mr. Du Feynman Vihar Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, what do you mean?" Hearing that the Middle Eastern tycoon spoke, Barron also suppressed his anger in an instant and asked carefully, "Since this gentleman bought this boat first, then we won't buy it. You have to pay attention to the rules and everything, don't you think so, mister?" Hearing Barron's words, the Middle Eastern tycoon chuckled. For these Middle Eastern tycoons, money is really just a string of numbers, and their identity makes them not very interested in using power and money to suppress people. Of course, the premise is that the other party is equal to them. Although this Middle Eastern tycoon doesn't know Jiang Hai's net worth, looking at his appearance, it doesn't prevent him from regarding Jiang Hai as equal to himself. So, after listening to these words, he took the initiative to speak to Jiang Hai. Hearing his words, Barron, who was still a bit hostile, just opened his mouth and didn't say anything. Since the Middle Eastern tycoon he wants to please doesn't care about this yacht, he obviously doesn't want to offend Jiang Hai. Chapter 300. After the voice of the Middle Eastern local tycoon fell, there was nothing more to say about the yacht. The Middle Eastern local tycoon just nodded to Jiang Hai and turned to leave. As for Barron, his expression was a little awkward. Just now, with the support of the Middle Eastern local tycoon, he naturally spoke very arrogantly. But when the Middle Eastern local tycoon left, he saw Jiang Hai and felt a little awkward. As the saying goes, no matter who you offend in the United States, don't offend the rich. A person who could afford a yacht of more than $5 million and had a group of beautiful girls around him was obviously not someone he could afford to offend. So after the Middle Eastern local tycoon left, he also nodded to Jiang Hai and left with his tail between his legs. Looking at the backs of the two people leaving, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smack his lips as if he hadn't had enough. According to his thinking, under such circumstances, shouldn't the other party come to find trouble with him? They might be looking down on him, oppressing him with power or money, and then he would fight back and slap them in the face to create a small climax. Generally, this was the arrangement of a melodramatic plot. But it seemed that God didn't give him such a chance. Before he could slap them in the face, these people left. In fact, Zhang Hai did think a little too much. Of course, it was also possible that he had just entered the upper circle, so he wasn't too clear. There were many brainless second generations in the world, but these brainless people were divided into real brainless and fake brainless. Those who were truly brainless were either dead or had caused their families to be destroyed, regardless of whether it was at home or abroad. Some brainless people were fake brainless. They deliberately pretended to be like this, mainly to live a happy life and not let their opponents guard against them. This was also a way to protect themselves. As for those second generations who wandered outside, each one was more cunning than the other, because if there was any mistake, the other party would seize the opportunity to destroy their families. Those who really understood this principle naturally received such education from an early age. The nouveau riche of the Middle East had been rich for many years, so they knew that there was nothing wrong with flaunting their wealth. It was also nothing to make some people jealous because they would not pose a threat to themselves. However, flaunting their wealth to the point of making enemies with the whole world was courting death. At least in the circle of the rich, it was better to have one more friend than one more enemy. The fact that Zhang Hai could buy a yacht that cost more than $5 million without batting an eyelid was proof that he wasn't a regular businessman. For someone like him, even if his status was not as high as his, there was no need to make enemies. Moreover, it was just a yacht. Why would he care? As for the issue of face that some people talked about, for the Arab tycoons, they were members of the royal family. The only thing they needed was to let their people know how great and magnanimous they were and not use money to take revenge on others. To these people, as well as the nobles and the rich, reputation was much more important than face. Moreover, he probably wouldn't have considered the issue of face if he let a ship pass. After the Middle Eastern nouveau riche left, things became much simpler. Soon, a staff member came over with the contract. Zhang Hai also signed on it and then directly transferred a total of $73 million. The extra money was the money to pay taxes. In the United States, whether it was buying or selling things, one had to pay taxes. It was a two-way tax. Therefore, one had to admit that the taxes here were really heavy. Fortunately, it was more than $5 million, and Zhang Hai could still afford it. However, when he saw the notification on his phone that the money in his bank account had shrunk by 1/5, Zhang Hai still felt a little distressed. Fortunately, he would soon find a way to make a lot of money. After the ship was returned to Zhang Hai, Jennifer also called a captain and brought Zhang Hai onto the ship. On the ship, she explained to Zhang Hai how to operate the ship. When Zhang Hai was in Winthrop, he had learned how to operate a ship from Ai to Hua and the others. Compared to the complicated fishing boats, this yacht was much more convenient. After all, there was no sonar or fish repellent, and there was no need to control the arms, winches, and other things. There were originally dozens of buttons, but there were only 5 or 6 in total. It was almost the same as driving a car. A series of buttons such as radio, speedometer, fuel gauge, anchor up, anchor down, etc. Zhang Hai had already memorized it after 10 minutes. Then, he deliberately drove the ship out for a spin. After making sure that he knew how to operate it, the captain left. Zhang Hai also drove the ship to the designated parking spot at the port. Because Zhang Hai bought the ship here, he had a free parking spot. The first 3 years were free, and after the 4th year he would have to pay some money, but it wasn't much. It could be considered as a benefit that Jennifer fought for him. For Zhang Hai, this parking spot was still somewhat useful, because he estimated that he wouldn't only come here once. After everything was done with the ship, Zhang Hai, Aphrodite, and the others also sat in the commercial car and returned to the hotel. However, he didn't notice that after his car left the parking lot, a Land Rover on the other side of the street also started its engine and followed Zhang Hai's car, following them at a leisurely pace. It wasn't until Zhang Hai and the others were about to arrive at the hotel that the car turned and left Zhang Hai's car. When Jiang Hai's car arrived at the hotel, in another car opposite the hotel, someone sat up. Boss, the target you asked us to keep an eye on has returned to the hotel. It seems that they just went to buy a yacht today, these damn rich people. Seeing Jiang Hai and the 10 girls walking into the hotel, a black man sitting in the driver's seat spoke in Spanish to the person on the other side of the phone. Hey, little Terry, don't worry, if these rich people didn't create conflicts, we wouldn't have the opportunity to make such a big profit. Keep an eye on him. I feel that this guy should have received some news recently, so he doesn't come out during the day. Does he think that he is safe during the day? Ridiculous. Listening to the black man's words, a rough voice came from the other side of the phone. In the middle of this voice, there were also some women's voices. As for what they were doing, there was no need to say. Hearing the boss's words, little Terry couldn't help but smile. Thinking of that fat sheep, it seems that they made a lot of money this time. At this time, Jiang Hai naturally didn't know about this. After returning to the hotel, he went to the nearby outdoor goods store to buy some things. Although it was a yacht, some outdoor goods were still indispensable. It's better to be safe than sorry. Therefore, Jiang Hai prepared a lot of things like life buoys, survival suits, smoke bombs, indicator lights, diving suits, and so on. Originally, he also wanted to buy a few more fire extinguishers, but considering that there were already some on the yacht, he didn't buy them. After buying these things, Jiang Hai went to buy some wine as well as some food. There were barbecue racks and other things on the ship. Naturally, there was a reason why the ship was so expensive. Jiang Hai was very well equipped with everything he needed. The kitchen was even more complete than Jiang Hai's house. This was also the reason why Aphrodite and the other girls were half crazy after boarding the yacht. It was really great. After buying a lot of things and filling his car, Jiang Hai waited for the arrival of Moses Adams. Moses Adams came back at 6:00 in the evening. He specially prepared some toys for Jiang Hai. What are those things you're holding? Automatic rifles? Are those RPGs? There is also a sniper rifle. My God, am I going to South America to fight? Originally, Jiang Hai only prepared some ordinary guns, plus some spear guns. Looking at the things in the big bag in front of him, he couldn't help but hesitate. If he didn't know Moses Adams's background, he would have thought that he was possessed by a South American drug lord. How did he get these toys? Hey, boss, these are actually just some small toys. Who asked you to not bring me along this time? You didn't bring any bodyguards or the like. If it was just you and those 10 delicate little girls, I was afraid that you would suffer losses at sea. Although this was what he said, Moses Adams knew that Jiang Hai wasn't going to play this time. It was very likely that he was going to receive the armor. Moses Adams didn't know who he received these things from, but he knew that the place with these things was definitely not a good place. It was still necessary to let Jiang Hai be more vigilant. Hearing Moses Adams's words, Jiang Hai also knew what he was thinking, but some things were destined to be impossible to say. So, he could only accept his kindness. Besides, he really didn't play with these things. Touching the Barrett M107 in the big bag, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. He suddenly hoped that someone would rob him at sea. Otherwise, wouldn't he have taken these guns for nothing? Early the next morning, Jiang Hai took Aphrodite and the other 10 girls, the car full of things, and the big bag to yesterday's port. But because Jiang Hai was going to leave the port today, his car also received permission to enter the port. Parking the car in front of his ship, Jiang Hai and the others began to put things on the ship. After more than an hour, they finally put everything in the car on the ship. Then, after Jiang Hai started the engine, Aphrodite untied the rope tied to the dock and jumped onto the ship. This luxurious yacht that was just bought yesterday slowly drove towards the sea with the sound of its own engine. As the ship left the dock, it gradually increased its speed. Although the speed of this ship wasn't as fast as a speedboat, it wasn't too far behind. After all, it was so expensive and the ship wasn't very big to begin with. After entering the sea, the speed at which it drove was still very satisfying. Chapter 301. Jiang, here's a drink and some roasted meat for you. Holding a glass of juice and a plate of roasted beef, Aphrodite walked into the captain's cabin and looked at Jiang Hai, who was looking at the GPS while steering the ship. After boarding the ship, Aphrodite and the others returned to their respective rooms. The rooms on this ship were definitely not enough for each of them, so they naturally lived together. Except for Jiang Hai, who lived alone, the others had at least 2 people to a room. Fortunately, they didn't mind. After putting their luggage in the room, they went to change into their swimsuits. Although the ship was still sailing and they couldn't swim in the sea, it didn't prevent them from playing on the deck. Unknowingly, it was noon, so they began to make lunch on the deck. Coming out to play naturally couldn't be like playing at home. Although the ship's kitchen was very complete, they still had to roast the roasted meat. However, they still prepared to eat the barbecued meat. Based on the current situation, they had already lit the fire and roasted it well. "Oh, thank you." Hearing her words, Jiang Hai first set the GPS route, then turned his head and smiled at Aphrodite. But when he saw her, the smile on his face couldn't help but stiffen. Because Aphrodite was wearing the bikini she wore at the beach that day. Jiang Hai had already seen this figure, but when he saw this outfit, he couldn't help but remember what happened that day. If it wasn't for that damn Qin Feng who came out to make trouble that day, something great might have happened between him and this beauty in front of him. "Let's eat something first." Seeing Jiang Hai's stunned look and fiery gaze, Aphrodite's face couldn't help but blush. She was a little shy now, but she still liked how Jiang Hai looked at her. She deliberately took 2 steps forward, straightened her figure, and whispered to Jiang Hai. She liked how Jiang Hai looked at her. "Oh, thank you." Hearing her words, Jiang Hai snapped out of his memories and couldn't help but smile awkwardly at her. Then, he took the juice and roasted meat. Jiang Hai didn't know if it was intentional, but when he took it, his hand naturally touched Aphrodite's. This made Aphrodite's face even redder, but unfortunately, Jiang Hai didn't go any further. Instead, he took these 2 things back to the chair and sat down to eat. He had to admit that although it wasn't the beef from his manor, these girls' roasted meat was much better than his. At least, the taste was quite good. Seeing Jiang Hai sitting on the captain's chair and eating the meat with relish, Aphrodite didn't leave. Instead, she sat directly in the chair opposite Jiang Hai and stared at Jiang Hai in a daze. To be honest, Jiang Hai's position in her heart had always been very strange. She really liked Jiang Hai, but this kind of wasn't love. Because although she had recovered to her best state, she still felt very dirty. She didn't deserve Jiang Hai. Not to mention a wife, she didn't even deserve a lover. Aphrodite only wanted to be Jiang Hai's maid, servant, and subordinate. She wanted to help him do things that he needed her to do. As for mental work, she couldn't help Jiang Hai. She was very clear about her physical strength, and she wasn't very good at it either. In a situation where both her mental and physical strength were lacking, offering herself might be the best choice. But in the face of her repeated hints, Jiang Hai had always kept his distance. She could feel that Jiang Hai was impulsive towards her, but for some reason, he was always able to control his impulses. She knew that Jiang Hai was afraid of hurting her, but she wanted Jiang Hai to hurt her. She had to admit that Jiang Hai really didn't have much talent in these matters. "You guys are really good. What are you roasting now?" With Jiang Hai's appetite, the plate of barbecued meat in front of him was quickly devoured by him. Jiang Hai licked the sauce on his lips as if he hadn't had enough, and asked in satisfaction. "We're roasting chicken meat right now. Our level is actually quite average, but the roasting oven here uses charcoal, so the taste is better than the one in the oven. Add to that the scenery, what we eat isn't the most important thing." Aphrodite explained to Jiang Hai when she heard Jiang Hai's words. Jiang Hai also smiled as he looked outside the window. Jiang Hai's gaze was currently fixed on the scenery outside. The blue sky, white clouds, and the sea as blue as the blue sky. Add to that the warm sunlight, and it was indeed very attractive. "Aren't you going out to play with us?" After cleaning up Jiang Hai's plate and cup, Aphrodite hesitated for a bit before asking Jiang Hai. She rather hoped that Jiang Hai would come out with them. "I won't. I'm going to stay here and watch the target's location. You guys have fun." However, Jiang Hai shook his head when he heard her words. He actually really wanted to see the firm skin of those beauties outside. However, he still had things to do right now. Aphrodite could only shrug her shoulders when she heard Jiang Hai's words. Her upper body bounced a couple of times before she took the plate and cup and left. Then I'll bring you food later. Looking at Aphrodite's departing figure, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smack his lips. Although he was a bit slow, how could he not know Aphrodite's feelings? In fact, it wasn't just Aphrodite. Dinah Taylor, Hilda Leonard, Peggy Hall, Shira Rodney, Odelia Cliff, Bridget Nelson, and Janice Joy. These 8 girls' thoughts were basically the same. He didn't know if it was because they really liked him or if it was just to repay his kindness. If Jiang Hai wanted to do something with them now, they definitely wouldn't refuse and would instead take the initiative to stick to him. Just like what Aphrodite said when she was joking, they wouldn't mind if the 8 of them did it together. However, Jiang Hai would mind. Although he wasn't a gentleman, he wouldn't hesitate when it came to hunting. But after all, he was going to get married and have children in the future. Aphrodite, Dinah, and the other girls, if nothing unexpected happened, would probably stay in his manor for the rest of their lives. He couldn't give them any status. However, if something really happened, not to mention the awkwardness after the 2 sides met, just his future wife might not be able to accept such a situation. However, if something happened, Jiang Hai couldn't chase them away and let them go somewhere else. It was precisely because of this that Jiang Hai was obviously a rabbit that didn't eat the grass near its burrow. He wasn't a very brave person and was especially conflicted. However, to be honest, Jiang Hai was also very depressed in his heart when faced with the temptations of these girls all day long. There were beauties asking you to come, but you were still in a state where you wanted to come, yet you couldn't. How depressing was that? In the past few days, the time he troubled Little Left and right at night was clearly more frequent than when he was in Winthrop. Originally, he wanted to find the front desk to have some fun, but these girls were watching him so closely that it was really difficult for him to do so. Beep, 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 beep. Just as Jiang Hai was thinking about the curves of these girls, to the point that even his big brother had some reaction, the satellite GPS in front of him couldn't help but ring. On the vast sea, there were no strong winds, but it was very easy to get lost while sailing on the sea. Jiang Hai's target this time wasn't any land, nor was it any small island. There were no points of reference, just an ocean. When there was only Jiang Hai, it didn't matter. He just had to head towards this point and gallop under the sea. However, now that the ship had set sail, Jiang Hai needed to avoid those big ships, cargo ships, and the like. At the same time, he also needed to not deviate from the route. Therefore, there was no way to set the ship on autopilot. He could only make adjustments here and there every now and then. This was also the fundamental reason why he didn't go out to play with those girls. Fortunately, after a few hours of sailing, Jiang Hai finally arrived at his target. According to the coordinates on the GPS, if nothing unexpected happened, his ship was now above the crack. The sonar at the bottom of the ship also proved Jiang Hai's conjecture. The bottomless image below made Jiang Hai grin. He had already completed the first step. Although the ship wasn't slow, it still took a lot of time. Casually drifting away from the crack, Jiang Hai stopped the ship and breathed a sigh of relief. Next, he had to prepare for the operation at night. This time, he wasn't just going to get the set of armor. In addition to that set of armor, Jiang Hai also wasn't going to let go of the jewelry worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Looking at the numbers that kept echoing back in the sonar, Jiang Hai also left the captain's cabin and walked back to his room. He needed to see if he had prepared enough things first. After confirming everything, Jiang Hai left the cabin. "Hey, Jiang Hai, you're here." Seeing Jiang Hai coming out, Daliana couldn't help but smile and ask, "I feel that the ship has stopped. Are we there yet?" Hearing Daliana's words, Marian also raised her head and asked Jiang Hai. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also nodded and said, "Oh, let's play here today and spend the night here. We'll go back tomorrow." Patting the heads of the 2 girls, Jiang Hai explained with a smile. He had work to do tonight. Although they didn't understand what Jiang Hai wanted to do, this didn't stop them from being very obedient. They also knew that they came here to play, but Jiang Hai didn't come here to play. He had important things to do. Chapter 302. Guns no problem. Spear guns no problem. Protective clothing no problem. Stab-resistant clothing no problem. Looking at the things on the bed in front of him, Zhang Hai couldn't help but whisper. This afternoon, he played with Delina and the others for the whole afternoon. He had to admit that playing with these girls always passed very quickly. Unknowingly, it was already night time. At night, Zhang Hai and the others specially cooked a pot of seafood porridge. After all, the barbecue grill didn't stop in the afternoon. It can be said that they ate for the whole day. It would be strange if they could eat in the evening. So at night, they only ate some porridge. After eating dinner, it was only 8 o'clock. Zhang Hai drove them back to their room and told them that no matter what they heard outside, they shouldn't come out unless Zhang Hai called them. There was a separate bathroom in these rooms. Zhang Hai also specially prepared snacks and water for them, so they really didn't need to come out. After listening to Zhang Hai's words, Aphrodite and the others didn't ask why. Because they simply didn't want to know, nor did they want to understand why Zhang Hai was like this. The only thing they needed to do was to listen to Zhang Hai. Even if Zhang Hai said that the sky was the moon during the day and the sky was the sun at night, they would still firmly stand on Zhang Hai's side. This was their insistence. It was precisely because of this that Zhang Hai brought them here and not Moses Adams. After the girls entered the room, Zhang Hai also took out the things he had prepared for himself. Most of the things in front were the same as last time, but in addition, Zhang Hai also brought a lot of bags, a very long rope with metal wires inside, and a big bottle of oxygen. If someone was here, they would be very surprised. It's understandable to bring bags. After all, they have to carry things. But the oxygen tank and the rope were a bit puzzling. But obviously, Zhang Hai didn't want to explain to the narrator, so he just carried these things and walked out of the cabin. After looking around and seeing that there were no other boats, Zhang Hai fastened one end of the rope to the boat with a metal buckle, then he jumped into the sea with the rope and the big pile of things. Hearing the splashing sound of Zhang Hai jumping into the sea, Aphrodite and the others were worried, but just like what Zhang Hai said, they didn't come out and continued to stay in the room. This time, Zhang Hai didn't use the underwater engine because there was really no need for it because the oxygen tank on his body was enough to make him sink. Once in the sea, Zhang Hai quickly sank down with the rope. The sea had buoyancy, but this buoyancy could only slow down Zhang Hai's speed. More than 1,000 meters, Zhang Hai was already familiar with it. Anyway, Zhang Hai ignored the water pressure. He didn't care about the diving speed, and he didn't need to breathe. After entering the water, his diving speed was still very fast. A few minutes passed in the blink of an eye, and Zhang Hai had already dived to a depth of a few hundred meters. He needed to be careful here. Although he ignored the water pressure, he still needed to be careful in the deep sea. If there was a giant squid or something like that, he would be able to react. Fortunately, he didn't encounter such an unlucky thing. Soon, Zhang Hai arrived right above the sunken ship he saw last time. He glanced at the cliffs on both sides. They were still covered with giant deep-sea lice. This time, Zhang Hai was much calmer. He knew that these things were harmless. Although they still looked a little disgusting, he still swung over lightly and climbed onto the ship from the cliff. The rope was also fastened to the ship by Zhang Hai with a metal buckle. After making sure that the rope was fixed, Zhang Hai left the oxygen tank here. He held 2 weapons in his hands and moved towards the cabin. He looked as careful as before. In a place like this, there was always nothing wrong with being careful. Although the last time he came here was only a few days ago, in the past few days, perhaps because of Zhang Hai's intrusion, there were a lot of sea creatures in this cabin. However, these sea creatures didn't pose any threat to Zhang Hai except for their ugly appearance. While gently moving towards the 3rd floor, Zhang Hai lightly bypassed these creatures. Not long after, Zhang Hai had already arrived at the 2 warehouses on the 3rd floor. The squid that was originally pinned to the wall by Zhang Hai had disappeared, but Zhang Hai's arrow was still there. He didn't know whether the squid escaped or was eaten clean by these deep-sea fishes. Anyway, this had nothing to do with Zhang Hai. He came here to make money. First, he used his cane to gently pick up the gems. Zhang Hai was afraid that there would be creatures in this pile of treasures. Fortunately, there were no animals here. With this thought, Jiang Hai gently picked up the gems. There were no other things inside except for the gems. Then Jiang Hai began to pick them up. Now he didn't classify them, but directly put them in his bag. Not long after, a black bag was full. Jiang Hai didn't continue to put it in because his bag was originally very big. If this bag was placed on the shore, it would weigh more than 200 pounds, and it wouldn't be light underwater because of its buoyancy. More than 200 pounds wasn't a big problem for Jiang Hai, who was twice the limit of human fitness. However, the strength of this ship was limited, so Jiang Hai just put this bag and returned to the deck. At this time, the oxygen tank came in handy. Jiang Hai took out another bag and tied it to the other side of the bag. At the same time, he tied the bag to the rope. Then he began to inject oxygen into the sealed bag. When a certain amount of oxygen was injected, the bag was tied tightly. Then the balloon made by Jiang Hai carried the bag of more than 200 pounds of gems along the rope fixed by Jiang Hai and slowly floated to the sea surface. After confirming that there was no problem with the bag, Jiang Hai returned to the cabin and began to put other things in. This was Jiang Hai's method. Although it seemed a bit stupid, it was a good method. Jiang Hai didn't have any special ability to command the creatures in the deep sea to serve him, so he could only think of a stupid way to send these things up. Although there was some risk in doing so, the risk was still within Jiang Hai's acceptable range. Then he returned to the cabin again and put another bag on the plate armor. Jiang Hai planned to take away all the gold, silver, and jewelry in the warehouse. When Jiang Hai first looked at it, he felt that there was about a ton of them. But when he packed it up, he realized that he had underestimated the warehouse. It was almost filled to the brim with more than a ton of treasures. Fortunately, Jiang Hai had prepared enough. Jiang Hai's big bag filled 14 bags before he could take away all these things. According to the calculation of 200 pounds per bag, or 100 kilograms per bag, 14 bags meant a total of 1,400 kilograms. In total, it weighed 1.5 tons. Moreover, Jiang Hai would pack more every time, 200 pounds more and no less. Last time, Jiang Hai brought back more than 8 kilograms of gems, which were sold for more than $2 million. Of course, these gems were sold by the kilograms, not by the kilograms, but that didn't stop Jiang Hai from calculating. 1,500 kilograms. According to the calculation that 10 kilograms could be sold for $3 million, these gems were worth a total of $450 million. Of course, there would be some discount because there were a lot of gold coins above, but most of the money below was silver coins. But if he sold it, at least half the price would be, which was more than $200 million. Thinking of this, the corners of Jiang Hai's mouth unconsciously opened again. Who would complain about having too much money? At least he wouldn't. From 8:00 in the evening, when the sky was completely dark, Jiang Hai began to get busy. Unknowingly, he was busy until 2:00 in the morning. At this time, the treasures in the warehouse had been moved to the surface of the sea by Jiang Hai. Next was the armor in the last warehouse. Jiang Hai reorganized his equipment and walked to another room. But when he opened the door of the warehouse, a creature appeared in front of Jiang Hai's eyes. Shark, shark. Looking at the guy in front of him who was wandering back and forth in this small room at this time, Jiang Hai couldn't help but roar subconsciously. Of course, his voice couldn't be heard at the bottom of the sea, but the movement of the water here also startled the shark. Its big head turned, and a pair of emotionless eyes were already staring at Jiang Hai. At this time, there was only one kind of shark here, the six-jaw shark, a common shark in the deep sea. It was a creature that had just been discovered by humans recently. It had evolved to its current form 200 million years ago and had lived for 200 million years. It was definitely a living creature. Jiang Hai had already checked this creature before coming. Its main food was squid, cephalopods, shrimp, crabs, and other crustaceans, all kinds of fish and marine mammals. Unless it was provoked, it usually wouldn't attack humans. Great white sharks usually wouldn't take the initiative to attack humans, but how many chances of survival were there when encountering a great white shark in the sea? Unless it was provoked? I wonder if being hungry counts as being enraged? This six-jawed shark was about 5 meters long. How did it enter this small cabin?
Jiang Hai was not clear about it.
But Jiang Hai knew very well that this shark didn't look friendly and was even full of malice. At the moment when their eyes met, Jiang Hai was surprised, but for this shark, it was a surprise. Chapter 303.
Who?
Although no sound could be heard underwater, the sound of water flowing when the shark swung its tail still entered Jiang Hai's ears. Then the shark rushed straight towards Jiang Hai like an arrow, as if it really saw its prey. Its bloody mouth full of sharp teeth also opened at this time. Looking at the shark rushing in front of him, Jiang Hai panicked, but he didn't lose his mind. He already knew how to deal with sharks before he came down. If he encountered a 10-meter-long great white shark, a 10-meter-long deep-sea squid, a 10-meter-long sperm whale, or a killer whale, Jiang Hai may not have many ways to deal with it. But a 5-meter-long shark, well, Jiang Hai did not have many ways to deal with it, but maybe because of the dragon tattoo on his body, Jiang Hai was particularly calm at this critical moment. According to what he learned on the internet, Jiang Hai directly punched out. The huge force even caused a bubble to form in the airless deep sea. The powerful force, coupled with the black net around the fist, directly hit the shark's nose. When attacked by a shark, there are two weaknesses of a shark. One is its nose, because a shark's nose is the most sensitive object in the world, hundreds of times more flexible than a dog's nose. A 1-meter-long shark can monitor the sea area within a few kilometers. It is precisely because of this that a shark's nose has a lot of nerve endings. It is very sensitive but also very fragile. So, if you are bitten by a shark, hit its nose. There is a lot of chance that it will let go. Another weakness is its eyes. Sharks have no eyelids, only eyelids, so its eyes are very easy to destroy. So, when attacked by a shark, hitting its eyes is also a good choice. Of course, in addition to this, sharks have another weakness, its gills. In the diet of sharks, the most important thing is sea turtles. When a sea turtle faces a shark, its main target is its gills. As long as it bites the shark's gills, the shark will be finished. But for humans, this weakness isn't very good. But even if the cheeks were wrong, the nose and eyes were definitely correct. Jiang Hai went up and punched him. The heavy blow landed on the shark's nose. In an instant, the shark went crazy. It swung its head and wanted to swim away. However, was Jiang Hai that easy to talk to? At this time, his other hand had already reacted and readied the spear gun. As Jiang Hai pulled the trigger, a sharp arrow instantly penetrated the body of the six-jaw shark. Pung pung. However, Jiang Hai's technique was not very good in a hurry. This arrow was slightly off target and only pierced the abdomen of the six-maned shark. Blood instantly flowed out, and the shark also struggled hard. But no matter how hard it struggled, it couldn't get the arrow out. The arrow of a spear gun was used to catch whales, so it was full of barbs. It was impossible for the shark to get it out on its own. The crazy shark kept hitting the deck of the boat with its body. For a while, the whole boat was shaking. This startled Jiang Hai. One must know that if the boat fell, then he would be fine, and the treasures could be ignored for the time being. But don't forget, this boat was tied to his yacht, and there were also 10 girls on it. Jiang Hai didn't bring them out to hide at the bottom of the sea. Looking at the crazy shark, Jiang Hai, who had already dodged to the side, had to grit his teeth. If he didn't kill this shark at this time, he would be the one who died. Immediately, he pulled out another spear gun. Jiang Hai loaded it in an instant and shot again. This time, Jiang Hai shot directly from the left rib of the shark and pierced the shark. Although 2 of the shark's vital points were damaged, the shark was not dead yet. It was still struggling there. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai didn't have the leisure and time to care about it. He took a step and instantly came in front of the shark. At the same time, he also took out the pistol that had been behind him. The shark saw Jiang Hai in front of it. Although it was difficult for it to understand what mutual destruction meant, it was because of this reason. So it also opened its big mouth and bit Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai looked at its big mouth and didn't retreat. Instead, he moved forward. One of his hands directly reached into the shark's mouth. When the shark's big mouth bit down, Zhang Hai's arm, which was wearing a stab vest, felt a sharp pain. Fortunately, the shark's bite was not strong enough. It didn't bite through Zhang Hai's clothes. Zhang Hai had already entered the shark's weak point. With a pistol in his hand, Zhang Hai was in the shark's mouth. He aimed at the shark's brain and pulled the trigger. Bang, 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 bang. With 5 consecutive shots, Zhang Hai had already fired all the bullets of the underwater pistol. After eating these 5 bullets, the shark's body finally couldn't bear it anymore. Its body unconsciously turned over and sank down with thick blood. Feeling that the shark was dead, Zhang Hai couldn't help but breathe a long sigh of relief. Bang! But just as Zhang Hai breathed a sigh of relief, the shark's body fell to the ground. The huge impact made the boat that was about to turn over because of the shark, and the tilting strength increased again. Not good. Feeling the direction of the boat, Zhang Hai couldn't help but mutter with a headache. He instantly opened the chest containing the armor beside him. Fortunately, the armor wasn't damaged in this incident. Then, he directly drilled through the hole in the ship's warehouse and out of the ship. Looking outside the boat, Zhang Hai found that the boat that was originally stuck here had tilted to 45 degrees and seemed to be continuing to tilt forward. If this continued, the boat would probably sink to the bottom of the sea in an instant. Now it was a race against time. If the boat really collapsed, then his small yacht would probably be pulled down by the boat in an instant. At this time, Aphrodite and the others on the sea were also very surprised because the boat kept tilting to one side, which surprised them. But thinking of Zhang Hai's words, they didn't leave the room. They just prayed that Zhang Hai would come back soon. If Zhang Hai knew that his orders would put these girls in danger, he would rather not bring these girls here. But it was too late to say this now. What Zhang Hai needed to do the most now was to untie or break the rope. Seeing this, Zhang Hai had a rare motivation and his body suddenly swam faster. In a few strokes, he had already reached the plate armor of the tilted boat. Looking at the rope in front of him, Zhang Hai immediately pulled out the dagger he had been carrying and cut the rope in front of him. But after cutting a few times, Zhang Hai found that he was a little too naive. Because he was afraid that the rope would break, Zhang Hai specially bought the thickest rope with steel wires inside. It was impossible to cut this kind of rope with a dagger in less than 10 minutes. But now, let alone 10 minutes, it might not even last a minute. Just as Zhang Hai was a little worried, he suddenly saw the piece of wood tied to the rope. I'm so stupid. Compared to the rope, this piece of wood that had been soaked in the sea for nearly 400 years was naturally easier to deal with. Zhang Hai went up without saying anything and directly kicked it. Just as Zhang Hai thought, perhaps this piece of wood was extremely strong 400 years ago, but now it was very difficult to withstand Zhang Hai's kick. In an instant, the wood on one side of the boat broke. Then Zhang Hai exerted force and pulled the rope to the other side. With a kacha sound, the wood that was originally tied to the rope was kicked into 2 pieces by Zhang Hai. At this moment, the 2 sides of the trench could no longer bear the weight of the boat. It tilted to the left and fell into the deepest part of the trench. Zhang Hai's oxygen tank, spear, and so on also fell down like this. Although he was a little emotional, Zhang Hai finally solved this problem. This made him, who was holding the rope, couldn't help but let out a long sigh. Then he tied the armor in his hand to his body and threw the remaining wood into the sea. Then Zhang Hai used his arms to climb forward. A distance of more than 1,000 meters if it was on land, Zhang Hai could easily climb, but it was easier to climb in the sea because of the buoyancy. It took a few minutes to go down, but it took less time to come up. After about 5 or 6 minutes of climbing, Zhang Hai's headlight had already shone on the bottom of his yacht. There were many huge bags around his yacht. Looking at these things, Zhang Hai couldn't help but be happy. This time he made a lot of money. Puff. With a splash, Zhang Hai finally emerged from the bottom of the sea. Although this deep-sea adventure had a lot of gains, it also scared Zhang Hai. First of all, he almost caused the people on the boat to fall into the sea. Secondly, there was the problem of the shark. If Jiang Hai wasn't lucky, he might have died in the deep sea this time. Although the treasure was good, sometimes you have to pay attention to it to see if you can live to spend it. Bang! Returning to the boat, Jiang Hai first sat on the deck and rested for half a day. These few hours also tired him out. The physical tiredness was secondary, the mental tiredness was really very tiring. After about half an hour, Jiang Hai sat up from the ground again. He first threw the armor back to his room, then changed into a new set of clothes and called Aphrodite and the others. The boat shook so much just now, is it okay? As soon as the door opened, Aphrodite looked at Jiang Hai and asked anxiously, "It's okay, I made you worry, but now it's time for us to harvest." Hearing Aphrodite's words, Jiang Hai smiled a little embarrassedly, but then looked at her seriously. Now is indeed the time for harvest. Chapter 304. Heavens, heavens, these things, how do we get them? Looking at the gold, silver, and jewelry on the bed, Aphrodite and the others were clearly in a daze. Many of them covered their small mouths. They knew that these things were very valuable. The treasures on Jiang Hai's bed were at least priceless. Although they were a little curious about where Jiang Hai got these things, they didn't ask. This was because they trusted Jiang Hai 100%, even if these things were snatched by Jiang Hai. Therefore, other than being surprised, Aphrodite asked Jiang Hai what to do now. Put these things separately. Put the coins of this color into this box, 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 and the other things into this box. Clapping his hands and throwing the last bag of jewelry to the side, Jiang Hai looked at the things in front of him and said slowly. To be honest, there were a lot of things, but the style was basically the same. Gold coins, silver coins, broken gems, pearl necklaces, and some decorations. For example, a belt made of pure gold with a few gems embedded in it, or a knife with a golden handle with a gem embedded in the handle. But after all, these things were still relatively rare. Because to be honest, gold and silver were not very suitable for making equipment apart from being used as decorations in gold and silver coins. This was because the texture of these things was too soft. For example, in some ancient movies, in order to distinguish whether the silver and gold were fake or not, people would often bite them. Even a person's teeth could be bitten, not to mention if they were on the battlefield. Wouldn't the other party's knife, spear, or whatever pierce through them? Therefore, there weren't too many of these decorations. Instead, the most of them were hard currency gold coins. Okay. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, everyone regained their senses and began to put these things into the 5 boxes that Jiang Hai had placed. Needless to say, gold and silver coins were the most abundant, but they were also the least valuable. After all, it was mass-produced. It would be strange if it was valuable. On the other hand, after the artificial cultivation of pearls, pearls were not too valuable. Now, there were only 2 kinds of pearls that were more valuable internationally, gold pearls and black pearls. These 2 kinds of pearls were really very expensive, but white pearls, if they were not big enough, were rarely valuable. As for large pearls, Jiang Hai only had a few dozen of them. If he sold them at the price of pearls, then Jiang Hai would suffer a huge loss. But if he sold them at the price of antiques, then they wouldn't be as valuable as gems next to them. Jiang Hai didn't care too much about these pearls. Since they were barely on par with the gold coins, Jiang Hai didn't care much about them. It was said that there was strength in numbers, but the premise was that there were not many things. Obviously, Jiang Hai had a lot of things. When Jiang Hai floated up, it was around 3:00 in the morning. It was already 4 o'clock when they started to pack. The 13 people worked together. By the time they finished packing everything, it was already past 11 o'clock. They originally thought that they could finish before 8 o'clock, but it seemed that Jiang Hai was thinking too much. When they finally finished packing everything into the boxes, Aphrodite and the others couldn't help but stretch. Jiang Hai, who hadn't slept all night, also couldn't help but relax a little. Come, each of you pick one. This is your salary. You're not allowed to refuse. Looking at these hard-working girls in front of him, Jiang Hai couldn't give them what they wanted most, but some material rewards were indispensable. He remembered that the last time he appraised them, They said that any of the gems here was worth tens of thousands of dollars. Jiang Hai didn't feel distressed about giving them away. After all, these girls were completely trustworthy. The most important thing was that he almost implicated these girls and made them hide at the bottom of the sea. If he didn't give these girls some things, he wouldn't be able to live with himself. No need. You can take us out to play. We'll be very happy. After listening to Jiang Hai's words, Dana Taylor waved her hand immediately. As she said, Jiang Hai brought them to Miami and provided food, accommodation, and entertainment. This was enough. Helping Jiang Hai complete some work was what they should do as employees. What's more, their hearts were still tied to Jiang Hai. How could they ask Jiang Hai for these things? Hey, I said, this is your salary. You earned it with your labor. One for each of you. If you don't want it, I'll help you choose. Looking at these girls in front of him, Jiang Hai shook his head. If he didn't give it to them, he would feel uncomfortable in his heart. If that's the case, then we'll take it. Anyway, Jiang Hai has so many. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Aphrodite hesitated and smiled at Jiang Hai. Her beautiful face was reflected in the sunlight in front of Jiang Hai's eyes. It was really beautiful. Feeling Jiang Hai's gaze, Aphrodite couldn't help but lower her head shyly, and Jiang Hai also reacted. He looked at the people in front of him and said, "Listen, your elder sister said so. Come on, take one each. Pick the good-looking one and take the big one." Seeing that Jiang Hai said so and deliberately picked a big one and stuffed it into the hands of the youngest, Yana's joy, everyone was no longer hesitant. Indeed, Jiang Hai had a lot of gems here. Not to say that there were tens of thousands, but at least thousands. It was not too much to just pick one. So, after thinking for a while, Dana took a pink gem. Hilda also deliberately picked a yellow gem. This gem was very valuable in the East. After all, not everyone could use yellow in the East. Basically, such yellow gems had to be related to the royal family. And once it was related to the royal family, this transparent yellow gem the size of a pigeon's egg was worth at least a few million. It was at least more valuable than Jiang Hai's pair of porcelain bottles. But in the West, yellow gems were just yellow gems and didn't count for much. After the two sisters picked their gems, the other girls also picked one that they liked. As for Yana's joy, she didn't want the biggest one that Jiang Hai gave her. Instead, she picked a red gem of the same size. This gem was very red and very beautiful. Soon, each of them had one piece. Even Daliana and Marian, who came here to help them after waking up, were playing with one piece each. As for women, no matter their age, they were like crows who couldn't resist these sparkling things. In the end, Jiang Hai deliberately chose a red gem that was somewhat heart-shaped for Aphrodite before putting the box away. This time, the sleepy faces of the girls changed completely. Everyone has worked hard. Now let's go make some food and then go back to sleep after eating. We will return at night. After clapping his hands to attract everyone's attention, Jiang Hai said to the girls in front of him. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the girls raised their hands in agreement. They were indeed a little too tired. Then Jiang Hai and the others went to the kitchen and made some simple seafood porridge. They also stewed a pot of beef as a side dish. The meal was very delicious. After eating all of it, they went back to sleep. Jiang Hai also checked his things and was ready to go to sleep. All he could do was to have a rough idea in his heart. As for the specific situation, he would let Philip's people worry about it. After sleeping until 4:00 in the afternoon, Jiang Hai woke up in a daze. He called Moses Adams and asked him to inform Phillips to receive this batch of things. At the same time, he started the yacht and prepared to return. After the auction this time, Jiang Hai was not going to go back by plane, but he was going to drive this thing back. He bought a yacht. He can't just leave it here. Moreover, in Jiang Hai's view, such things are inevitable in the future. Don't forget, he still has a lot of sea maps in his hands. After getting a call from Jiang Hai, he, who was sleeping comfortably in the hotel, also jumped up for the first time. He patted the back of the hotel's special service girl next to him, put on his clothes, and drove the tired girl out. Then he called Phillips's people. After receiving the call, Phillips's people didn't dare to be careless. Whether it was the jewelry worth hundreds of millions of dollars that Jiang Hai said this time, or the armor, these things were extremely precious to Phillips. Therefore, a large number of security vehicles and even helicopters were sent to quickly rush to the small dock in the port of Miami. For safety's sake, they even purposely separated a section to prevent ordinary people from entering. The staff of the dock could ignore other people, but they still had to respect Phillips. This was because they had cooperated with Phillips before. For example, when some rich people went bankrupt, their yachts parked here would naturally be used to pay off their debts. At this time, Phillips said that he would seal off a small section of the road, so naturally, there was no problem. But when the person in charge here saw that Jiang Hai's yacht was the target of these people, he couldn't help but be a little surprised. Because the person in charge here was Jennifer's boss. Someone had already told him about Jiang Hai's yacht the day before yesterday. Unexpectedly, the person who robbed the yacht of a rich man from the Middle East had the power to make Phillips stand up for him. Everything is inside. Be careful when you take it. As the boat docked, Jiang Hai also threw the rope on the dock. After fixing the position of the boat, Jiang Hai jumped off the boat. Looking at the person in charge of Phillips, he didn't know whether he was of Latin American or Middle Eastern descent. Jiang Hai said lightly. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the man's eyes suddenly lit up. Then, he sent people to board the boat. Under the command of Aphrodite and others, the 5 boxes in Jiang Hai's room were carried out. Chapter 305. Are there only a few of you here? Can't you find more people to come over? It's almost midnight. Jiang Hai glanced at his watch, then looked at Aphrodite and the others who didn't sleep last night and couldn't stand it tonight. Hearing his words, the person in charge opposite him couldn't help but smile awkwardly. Since Jiang Hai's ship arrived at the dock, Jiang Hai took these things and boarded the escort car arranged by Phillips. Of course, Moses Adams, who has been waiting here for a long time, was also in the car. The group soon arrived at Phillips' office in Miami, and then the experts prepared by the person in charge came in handy. Unfortunately, he underestimated Jiang Hai's treasures. He only prepared 6 experts, and it takes more than 10 minutes or even more than half an hour for each expert to appraise the authenticity of an item. After all, these things are very valuable. If one of them makes a mistake, they will be the ones to suffer a loss. So they have to deal with it carefully. Jiang Hai and the others arrived here at 7:00 in the evening. Until now, it's already past 2:00 in the middle of the night, and these people have only counted about half of the things. The other half of the things haven't been touched yet, especially the most important one, the set of armor. He hasn't slept for almost 2 consecutive days. With Jiang Hai's physique, although it's not to the extent that he can't stand it, it's inevitable that he's sleepy. He couldn't help but yawn and helplessly said to the person in charge in front of him, "I'll deal with it right away." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, although the person in charge complained at his heart that Jiang Hai brought so many things here, he wouldn't say so. After all, these things can generate wealth for the auction house. Although that set of armor is a big deal, in fact, the money that can be earned from the auction of that set of armor is not too much. The only thing they could ask for was the commission after the auction. However, in order to win over Jiang Hai, a big customer, the original 10% commission had been reduced to 3%. 100 million would only earn them 3 million and 1 billion would only earn them 30 million. It was really not much. They were more interested in earning money to advertise themselves. However, if he were to sell these jewels, gold, and silver coins, it would be real money. The price they offered Jiang Hai was very high, but no matter how high it was, they still made a profit. Even if they made $100 for each gold coin, $10 for each silver coin, and $1,000 for each gemstone, this large amount of jewelry was enough to make them hundreds of millions. Therefore, compared to the armor, they had no choice but to be more careful with it. However, as Jiang Hai had said, the progress of 6 people handling such a large pile of jewelry was indeed too slow. Not to mention whether they could handle it, it was also very tiring for him to wait here. Therefore, after thinking for a while, he went out and found a group of clerks. These people were the staff of Phillips's office in Miami. Their main purpose was to help with the appraisal. Of course, they would not touch the precious jewels and gold coins, but they could help with the ordinary silver coins. For this purpose, he specially asked them to change into a set of clothes without pockets before he came over and started to work. After distributing the largest amount of silver coins, the rest of the people appraised the valuable items, which was indeed a lot faster. At 5:00 in the morning, all the gold and silver coins were appraised. This time, Zhang Hai got a total of 27,665 gold coins and 86,742 silver coins. Of course, these gold and silver coins were not all from Spain. In fact, the currency in Europe had always been very chaotic. There was no clear currency, especially in the Middle Ages of Europe. From the 14th to the 16th century, the currency in Europe was quite chaotic. Europe was already in a mess, let alone the American continent, which was colonized by them. At the beginning of the 14th century, the lords of Shenluo imitated the Rho groschen coin and made the groschen coin, which was a hard currency at that time. But then, France issued gold coins twice, both of which failed. It was not until the standard gold coin of France appeared that the currency stabilized and was used until the era of Louis XIV. Then, in 1344, England issued a noble gold coin, which weighed about 972 grams and was worth 6 shillings and 8 pence, which was equivalent to half a mark, gold, and 1/3 of a pound silver, but it was not very popular. The lords of the Rhine unified the standard of imitating the Rho groschen coin and called it the Rhine shield, but the shield was very light. At first, it only weighed 23 carats. 23 carats was not a gram. Otherwise, if a diamond had a dozen carats equal to a dozen grams, it would be a big deal. Conversion units were 5 carats equal to 1 gram. The Rhine shield was 23 grams and half a carat in the early stage and 19 carats in the later stage. Converted to grams, it was about 4 grams. For pirates, such a large amount of gold coins was really not enough. In addition to the Spanish gold coins, Zhang Hai had the most gold coins from the golden Egyptian and English nobles. Basically, each of them weighed nearly 10 grams. Only these gold coins were valuable enough. Although they were not all Spanish gold coins, they were of about the same age and weight, so their value was naturally not much different. According to the orders of the auction house's leader, the person in charge was still according to the price of the last transaction. 1 gold coin was $1,000 and 1 silver coin was $350. In total, there were more than 110,000 gold coins. 1 ton of gold and silver coins was worth $58,024,700. More than $50 million was not a lot, but it was very much in line with Zhang Hai's requirements. At least as soon as the money came out, his savings rose again. And most importantly, the gems had not been identified yet. With the money as a foundation, Zhang Hai felt a lot better. Unknowingly, the sun in Miami shone on this land. It was not until 9:00 in the morning that Aphrodite and the others, who had already fallen asleep, finally got up and moved their sore bodies. Finally, the last gem had been identified. The appraiser over there handed the forms to the person in charge. The person in charge did a rough calculation and then looked at Zhang Hai with some surprise. "What's wrong? Is there something wrong?" Zhang Hai leaned on the sofa and looked at the person in charge in front of him. Of course not everything is right, but this is really a lot of money. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, the person in charge here shook his head, walked in front of Zhang Hai, and handed the 6 forms to Zhang Hai. These 6 tables were made by the 6 people. Every time they finished looking at an item, they would record a string of numbers on it. This was their estimate. Basically, the auction house wouldn't make a loss, so they would calculate and buy according to the price on the table. Although they didn't know where Zhang Hai got these things from, it didn't prevent them from collecting these things. After taking the forms in front of him, Zhang Hai also looked at them. When he saw the first form, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. 1 pigeon blood ruby, net weight 41.5 carats, estimated age between 1600 to 1650. Other items: none, just a necklace pendant, estimated price 183,350 to 192,275. 1 golden green cat's eye, net weight 37. 84 carats, estimated age 1600 to 1650. Other items, a string of natural pearl lotus, estimated price 156,700 to 158,900. Looking at the numbers above these things, Zhang Hai couldn't help but be happy. Not only were there rubies, emeralds, sapphires, topaz, but there were also many cat's eyes, golden green gemstones, and so on. There were even ivory and coral products. Zhang Hai didn't know much about these, but he understood the estimated price at the back. Even if they were all calculated according to the lowest price, he would still make a profit this time. The 6 forms were about the same, and Zhang Hai also calculated the price of these things in his heart. This made his heart skip a beat. Sure enough, for a pirate ship like this, gold and silver coins were just a small part. The real value was these jewelry. For these jewelry, I won't quote you according to the lowest price. Let's take a round number. The gold and silver coins here are 58 million. My final price for these jewelry is 242 million. Let's make it 300 million.
What do you think?
Seeing Zhang Hai put down the things in his hand with satisfaction, the person in charge here hesitated and reported the price of this batch of jewelry to Zhang Hai. Zhang Hai knew that if he auctioned this batch of jewelry, he could at least sell it for 100 million or even more. But there was a problem, and that was the problem of paying taxes. Also, if he wanted to sell these jewels, he would have to pay some commission. Counting all the money, he could probably get 200 million yuan in his hands. Now that he could get 300 million yuan, it was pretty good. No problem deal. After calculating in his heart, Zhang Hai also looked at Moses, Adams next to him. After Moses, Adams saw Zhang Hai's gaze, he handed over his mobile phone. There was a string of numbers on it. This was the price he estimated. 280 million, this was Moses, Adams's estimate. It was 20 million less than this price. This proved that the other party didn't lie to him this time. Moses, Adams really didn't sleep for a second tonight. He had been staring at these jewelry. From time to time, he took photos and sent them to the antique dealers he knew to estimate the price. Although it was not very proper to do this, this was the United States. It was not uncommon for Phillips to do this. He didn't sleep all night, but now he was in good spirits because he was already prepared. After all, he just got up yesterday afternoon. Even if he stared at it all night, his eyes were just a little red now. Chapter 306. It's indeed a pleasure to work with you. Seeing that Zhang Hai had agreed, the person in charge didn't hesitate. It was indeed very refreshing to work with Zhang Hai. From the bottom of his heart, Zhang Hai wasn't the kind of person who would hesitate over $10,000 or $100,000. If you asked him to spend the money on some strangers, he might not be happy, but it didn't matter now. After all, the two of them still had a big show that hadn't started yet. The armor was worth much more than the 300 million. When the two of them shook hands, a secretary had already drafted a document. After Moses Adams looked at it and confirmed that there were no problems, Zhang Hai signed his name on it. After Phillips's person in charge signed his name and stamped it with Phillips's seal, Zhang Hai's effect this time was considered complete. Phillips had bought Zhang Hai's jewelry for $300 million in private. Because it was a private purchase, there was no need to file tax returns, so Zhang Hai received the full amount. Of course, if Zhang Hai wanted others to know and file tax returns, the tax bureau wouldn't refuse. It was similar to private transactions in China, except that the amount was a little too big. After the jewelry was sorted and taken away, Zhang Hai's phone vibrated. His Centurion card had an extra balance of more than 20 million, and now there was an extra $321 million. This was Zhang Hai's current net worth. As the saying goes, if you have money at home, you won't panic. Zhang Hai had money in his pocket now, so he didn't panic. After keeping the phone, all that was left was the question about the armor. Zhang Hai authorized Phillips to auction it. After the auction, Phillips would take 3% of the money as commission. In addition, he would have to pay 35% of the tax. Originally, he would also have to pay state taxes, but Florida had an advantage. There was no income tax. If it was auctioned in New York, Zhang Hai would have to pay 15% more. Now that the 15% had been saved, it was good news that could not be discounted. In other words, apart from the commission and tax, Zhang Hai would get 62% of the profits from the armor. Although 1/3 was taken away, Zhang Hai's heart was still surging. After all, this was his chance to make the most money. After all, the experts estimated that the armor was worth $1 billion. This was only the lowest price, and it would definitely go up. Even if it was $1 billion, Zhang Hai would get more than $600 million. This was undeniably good news for him. After signing the entrustment agreement, Phillips began to prepare for publicity. The armor's auction would take place in a week. According to Phillips's words, such armor should at least be auctioned in the spring auction. The auction house was similar to the Fashion Week, but the Fashion Week was divided into 4 seasons. However, the auction house only had one season, which was the spring auction. They would save a year's worth of good goods and then auction them in the spring auction. Unfortunately, Zhang Hai couldn't wait that long. Therefore, they could only advertise for a week and then auction it directly. Although it was a pity, it wasn't difficult to tell rich people that they had good things in this era. After everything was settled, Zhang Hai and the others also left Phillips's office. Although everyone was a little sleepy, they were very excited after knowing that Zhang Hai had made a lot of money. Looking at the sunlight outside, Zhang Hai took out his phone and casually pressed a few buttons. Behind him, Moses Adams' phone rang. He took out his phone and saw that his balance was $2 million. Seeing this, Moses Adams couldn't help but look at Zhang Hai excitedly. This was a lot of money. This is the money I'm giving you this time.
Do your best.
Seeing Moses Adams looking over, Zhang Hai smiled. He had just made $300 million, and there was a bigger sum of money waiting for him. $2 million was actually not a lot. After all, he still had a lot of things to trouble Moses Adams. Moses Adams might seem to be having fun here all day long, but he was really busy. In fact, he was really busy. Zhang Hai knew that this guy was definitely one of the top lawyers in Boston. There were countless cases that needed his help every day. The reason why he rushed over because of his phone call was that he wanted to curry favor with him, and also because they were closer. For such a friend, Zhang Hai was never stingy. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Moses Adams put his phone away.
He didn't refuse Zhang Hai.
Besides, in this world, there was no one who could refuse $2 million. Although he had a good relationship with Zhang Hai, work was work, and it couldn't be mixed with private matters. Looking at his smile, Zhang Hai also smiled. It was fine as long as the two understood in their hearts. They didn't need to say it out loud. Where are we going now? Seeing that Zhang Hai and Moses Adams had finished talking, Marian came over and tugged at Zhang Hai's clothes and asked curiously. Hearing her words, Zhang Hai couldn't help but roll his eyes at her. Go back to sleep. You haven't slept well for 2 days. Aren't you tired? Patting Marian's little head, Zhang Hai said with a smile. We're going back now? I was thinking that since we have nothing to do today, let's go to Disney. You promised us to go. Looking at Zhang Hai, Marian curled her lips helplessly. Compared to going out to play and going back to sleep, going to the amusement park was more in line with the mentality of a girl of her age. Hearing her words, Zhang Hai couldn't help but laugh. What's the hurry? We still have at least a week to stay here. We can go at any time these days. Orlando isn't far from here. Zhang Hai was telling the truth. Orlando was only more than 300 kilometers away from Miami. It was only a 3-hour drive. It wasn't very far, so Zhang Hai and the others were really not in a hurry. Okay then. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Marian was indeed a little sleepy. Seeing that Zhang Hai hadn't forgotten the agreement between them, she was relieved and couldn't help but yawn. Then, shall we go now? Seeing that Zhang Hai said that he wanted to go back to sleep, Aphrodite and the others didn't have as much energy as Daliana and Marian. They didn't rest well for 2 days in a row, and they were a little tired. No, let's eat something first before going back. I'm tired of the hotel's buffet. Let's change to something else. Jiang Hai and the others had been eating breakfast and dinner in the hotel these days except for occasionally going out for lunch. Although the hotel's buffet is good, to be honest, the taste is not very good. It's okay to eat it once, but to let a picky guy like Jiang Hai eat it every day, he can't eat it anymore. After saying this, Jiang Hai swept around. After all, it was still morning, and it was not good to eat too much oil, so he was going to find some street snacks. He only saw that at this time, in front of an intersection on the street, there was a food car parked there. A Latin American woman was busy there with her husband and 2 children. Jiang Hai's eyesight was quite good. Although far away, Jiang Hai saw a lot of delicious food on the car. In addition to the most famous tacos here, there were also hot dogs and hamburgers. Seeing these things, Jiang Hai couldn't help but feel a little hungry. He said to Aphrodite and the others beside him, "You go get the car, I'll go buy something." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the others nodded, yawned and were about to leave, but Aphrodite was not in a hurry to leave. After hesitating for a moment, she said to Jiang Hai, "Let me go with you. There are so many servings, it's not easy for you to carry." Hearing her words, Jiang Hai thought for a moment and nodded. Indeed, it was impossible for him to only buy his own. There were a total of 12 people here. Even if each person bought 2 servings, there would be a total of 24 servings. It was indeed a bit too much. It was not bad to have someone to help him get it. Jiang Hai took Aphrodite to the stall. Seeing that there were guests, the man who was making pancakes couldn't help but raise his head, curl his tongue, and said with an excited face, "Welcome, what do you want to eat? Our pancakes here are absolutely the best. The sauce we use is imported from Mexico." Hearing the man's words, Jiang Hai also nodded. Indeed, the sauce used by these people has a Mexican logo on it. It doesn't look like the kind bought in the supermarket here. Jiang Hai really hasn't eaten such authentic burritos before. "We want a total of 24 burritos. You have to make it faster." Hearing the words of the man in front of him, Jiang Hai couldn't help but say, "Okay." Hearing that Jiang Hai wanted so much, the man couldn't help but smile. This is a big job. Burritos, also known as tacos, are a traditional food in Mexico. They use a tortilla to stuff meat, vegetables, and so on. It's similar to hot dogs, but hot dogs use bread and burritos use tortillas. This tortilla is similar to the pancakes often eaten in the north of the country, but it is crisper than that kind of pancake. If there is a comparison, there is a kind of pancake fruit. This kind of pancake fruit is called mixed grain pancake. It has a thin layer and is very crispy. It's similar to this burrito, so these burritos are delicious and freshly made. Picking up a spoon, the man immediately picked up the pancake, and the woman helped to chop the filling. The stuffing in this thing is also very particular, and the variety and quantity are not ordinary. According to what everyone likes to eat, the stuffing is different, and of course, the price is different. Chapter 307. The store really had everything. You could put beef patties, fried chicken fillets, fried meat slices, turkey slices, hot dog sausages, and stewed pork. Apart from that, there were also a lot of vegetables, lettuce, zucchini, celery, corn kernels, kale, onions, and even fried potato sticks. According to the price, 1 meat dish and 2 vegetables dish was $2. Every meat dish was $1, and a free vegetable dish was also given away. The portions weren't small, and there were a lot of things. It really did seem very affordable. What Aphrodite and the others wanted were the regular ones, beef patties and turkey slices. It was early in the morning, and they didn't want to eat fried food. The vegetables were red zucchini and lettuce. But compared to the low-quality ones they wanted, Jiang Hai wanted the high-quality ones. He wanted beef patties, turkey slices, fried meat slices, fried chicken fillets, and hot dog sausages. For the vegetables, he wanted lettuce, zucchini, and potato sticks. Jiang Hai's pancakes cost $6, and he asked for 2. The stall owner was very happy. After preparing the things Jiang Hai and the others wanted, they waited for the male owner to sell the pancakes. Of the 24 pancakes, apart from the 2 Jiang Hai wanted, each was $2, which added up to $44. The two Jiang Hai wanted were $12, which added up to $66. Jiang Hai gave them $100, and there was no need for change. He was in a good mood today. With such a generous tip, the stall owner worked even harder. He even gave Jiang Hai and the others bigger and thicker pancakes. The female stall owner also quickly added another portion of the meat that had already been prepared. The pancakes that had already been spread out were wrapped up according to their initial distribution. After picking up the meat and vegetables, she even sprinkled sauce on them. This stall really had a complete set of sauces. There were a total of 6 sauces, all of which were salsa, the most famous sauces in Mexico. In this world, they were considered unique. The red sauce, which was the usual hot sauce, was made with tomatoes, red peppers, onions, garlic, and coriander. It tasted very hot and sour. The raw sauce was made with tomatoes, lime juice, red peppers, onions, and coriander. It was a little more sour than the red sauce. The green sauce was made with Mexico's special green tomatoes and peppers. It tasted a little more refreshing but wasn't as spicy. In addition, there was guacamole, burrito sauce, mango salsa. Almost anyone who liked to eat this kind of or material could find a taste that he liked here. Jiang Hai, for example, preferred burrito sauce and red sauce because they were spicier. The others, on the other hand, all made burrito sauce. Soon, the first 22 servings were wrapped up, and it was Jiang Hai's turn to have his 2 oversized pancakes. When the female stall owner finished making Jiang Hai's pancake, Aphrodite couldn't help but be a little surprised. She really gave Jiang Hai face. Their pancakes were already double the amount of meat, but Jiang Hai's pancake still looked like it was at least 3 times bigger than theirs. She had to admit that these two people were really happy. Jiang Hai took the pancake and took a big bite. In an instant, the taste of the sauce, meat, and vegetables directly rushed into his mouth. In addition to the originally very crispy skin, Jiang Hai's eyes unconsciously curved. If there was anything similar between Jiang Hai and him a year ago, other than his face, it would probably be his sense of taste. He really likes to eat, especially delicious food. Like this thing, perhaps in the eyes of the upper class, it's nothing more than street food, but in Jiang Hai's eyes, it's a pretty good delicacy. Let's go! Seeing how happy Jiang Hai was eating, Aphrodite couldn't help but smile. She carried the rest of the things and waved at Jiang Hai. At this time, Moses, Adams, and the others had already driven out. They drove a total of 2 cars. In addition to Jiang Hai's MPV, there was also a car rented by Moses, Adams. Although the MPV was a little crowded, these girls obviously wouldn't sit in Moses Adams' car. Thus, the 2 cars displayed a very strange scene. One side was almost crowded to death, while the other side only had 1 car. Seeing that the car was parked, Aphrodite prepared to return to the car first and give the food to these people. And Jiang Hai also knew. He nodded while eating and walked toward the MPV. But just as Jiang Hai left the stall and was about to go to the MPV, his eyebrows suddenly jumped for no reason. This made Jiang Hai instantly alert. At this moment, a car engine appeared in Jiang Hai's ears. Then, a car quickly drove across the intersection in front of them. When it saw Jiang Hai, not only did the car not slow down, it even sped up. Seeing this scene, the alarm bells in Jiang Hai's heart rang loudly. He instantly took a step forward and pushed Aphrodite, who was still in front of him, toward his MPV. Jiang Hai's strength was so great that in an instant, this push almost sent Aphrodite flying. The pancakes in her hand also fell to the ground at this time, but this force allowed her to get in immediately. Everyone in the MPV, who originally wanted to open the door to take the pancakes, was stunned for a moment. They completely didn't understand why Jiang Hai suddenly attacked Aphrodite. Aphrodite herself was also a little surprised. After getting into the MPV, she looked back with a puzzled expression, wanting to see why Jiang Hai was doing this. But when she turned back, she saw a car speeding toward Jiang Hai. Seeing this scene, all the girls covered their mouths in surprise. If this car hit an ordinary person, it would probably be over in an instant, but Jiang Hai was Jiang Hai. The child of the dimension was not a joke. Seeing that the car was only about 10 meters away from him and had no intention of slowing down at all, Jiang Hai secretly cursed, "Damn it." At this speed, the car would reach him in less than a second. Jiang Hai didn't have much time left. But if he resigned himself to fate, that would not be Jiang Hai's way of doing things. In an instant, he jumped to the ground and rolled like a lazy donkey, dodging the front of the car by a hair's breadth. After the car missed Jiang Hai, it also spun and hit the curb on the left. The huge impact made the people in the car suffer a lot. But it was obvious that these people were already prepared because the moment the car was paralyzed, 4 people ran out of the car. These 4 people were all wearing safety helmets. It was obvious that the impact just now did not make them feel too uncomfortable. The only one who was affected was probably the driver. After these 4 people jumped out of the car, they reached behind them and 4 pistols appeared in their hands. Seeing these 4 people take out their guns, Jiang Hai's heart was also alarmed. "Close the door." Seeing that Aphrodite and the others were already scared silly, Jiang Hai ran away in a flash. After all, Aphrodite and the others were not kind people in the past. They closed the door immediately, and Jiang Hai instantly ran to Moses Adams' car behind the MPV. Moses Adams' reaction was not slow. When he saw the people in front of him get out of the car, he immediately hid in the driver's seat. When he saw Jiang Hai running over, he did not forget to open the door of the front passenger seat and let Jiang Hai in an instant. And the moment Jiang Hai flashed into the car, there were thunderous gunshots outside the car. The 4 people wearing safety helmets had guns in their hands and kept shooting at Jiang Hai. This car rented by Moses Adams had almost no reaction and was riddled with holes by these people. But fortunately, this car was not a bad car to begin with. It was a Cadillac CTS. Although it was not expensive, the car still cost more than $100,000. It was not sold in China at all. So although its bulletproof ability was not strong, it was not particularly weak either. At least it was not comparable to these people's pistols. "Boss, who did you provoke this time?" Holding his head and lying in the driver's seat, Moses Adams asked Jiang Hai with some confusion. It was obvious that he was also scared this time. He had never encountered such an attack before. "How would I know? These people, are they from the auction house? Don't they want me to take the money away?" Jiang Hai, who was also holding his head and squatting there, couldn't help but shout loudly. He really couldn't think of where these people came from. The only thing he could think of was probably the auction house. It shouldn't be possible. But after listening to Jiang Hai's words, Moses Adams was not sure. Although Phillips was not the largest auction house and would occasionally cheat others, it was still the 3rd largest auction house in the world after all. They also cared about their reputation. If this matter was spread out, who would come here to auction? That didn't seem likely. If not, why hasn't anyone come out to help yet? Maybe they heard Jiang Hai's words, but in Jiang Hai's slightly contemptuous voice, more than 20 security guards suddenly rushed out of the auction house in the distance. It had to be admitted that Jiang Hai was thinking too much. Although letting Jiang Hai take away the money made the people above Phillips a little uncomfortable, to put it bluntly, they were businessmen, not robbers. It was not worth it to cheat Jiang Hai of more than $1 billion and ruin their reputation. The reason why these people came out a little slowly was mainly because they had to report first. These people were specially left here by the auction house. After all, there were now jewelry worth $300 million and armor worth $1 billion here. If the other party was luring the tiger away from the mountain, the losses would be borne by them. However, Jiang Hai was their customer after all. If a customer was attacked as soon as he went out, they would be crazy to care. So it only took a minute for the person in charge to count the 20 security guards and go out with weapons to help. When the 4 people saw the 20 people coming out with weapons to help, they also panicked a little. Chapter 308. Retreat. The Phillips auction house was only a few dozen meters away from the place where Jiang Hai had an accident. When these people rushed out, the weapons in their hands were already in range. Many people had already opened fire. Compared to the small pistols in these people's hands, these security guards had big guns. Listening to the gunshots and feeling the bullets whizzing past them, the leader also knew that if they didn't leave now, they would die here. He immediately roared and wanted to leave, but how could it be so easy? Their car was already wrecked from the start. Now, the driver in the car was shaking his head as he climbed out of the car. He wanted to run now, but they didn't have a car. There were 2 cars in front of them that could run, but Aphrodite and the others were sitting in one of them. They had already locked the doors and windows, and Jong Hai and Moses Adams were in the other one. How could it be that easy? Grab that MPV. Just as they were struggling, the driver who just got out of the car couldn't help but shout loudly. Hearing this voice, the other 4 bad guys rushed toward the MPV immediately. F***CK, they're going for Delina and the others. Do you have any weapons here? Seeing these people's actions, Jong Hai, who had just breathed a sigh of relief because of the arrival of the security guards, instantly became angry again and asked Moses Adams loudly. Hearing Jong Hai's words, Moses Adams couldn't help but think for a moment. Then he took out a wrench. There is only this in the car, but there is a gun in the trunk. Handing the wrench to Jong Hai, Moses Adams said to Jong Hai. He knew that Jong Hai's skills were not bad. Now his only chance of survival was in Jong Hai's hands. Okay, go get it. Seeing that the people over there were almost in front of the MPV, Jong Hai didn't care so much. He immediately opened the door and ran out, and Moses Adams also bent down to open the door and went to the trunk. At this moment, the fastest criminal had already arrived in front of the MPV. Of course, he couldn't pull the door open. After trying for a while, he smashed the car window with a punch and prepared to pull the car open from the inside. Unfortunately, the moment he stretched his hand in, Daliana, who had been hiding behind him, directly took out a modified knife and forcefully stabbed it into his hand. Although Daliana didn't have much strength, she was still able to stab a modified knife into his hand. The huge impact instantly pierced the man's hand and caused him to suffer a puncture wound. Ah! With a miserable cry, blood spurted out from his hand. His attempt to snatch the carriage was halted. As for the others, they originally thought that these women weren't a threat, but now they actually dared to fight back. They were simply courting death. They also raised their weapons in an instant. Seeing that these people were about to shoot, Jong Hai had already arrived in front of the car. The wrench in his hand instantly smashed at the nearest gangster. Whoosh! The wrench was not small. It was thrown with Jong Hai's full strength, plus the huge wind resistance, which caused a loud sound. The gangsters here were miserable. If they weren't wearing helmets, they might have a chance. But they were wearing helmets, so there was no way to hear it. With a bang, the wrench hit the gangster's head heavily. The huge impact of the wrench even directly smashed the gangster's helmet, and the gangster was also instantly smashed out, heavily hitting the other 2 gangsters who wanted to shoot. His head tilted, and no one knew whether he was dead or alive. Who the F***CK? Seeing that another one of his companions had fallen, the driver couldn't help but draw out his pistol at this time and shoot at Jong Hai. But Jong Hai had long been prepared for him. He raised his hand, and Jong Hai rushed to the back of the MPV in front of him. He just avoided the gunman's shot. At this time, next to the Cadillac, Moses Adams had also taken out the gun case. Seeing his movements, Jong Hai motioned him to throw the case directly. Without saying much, he threw the case directly and then hid behind the car. After Jong Hai took the case, he immediately opened it. As the case was opened, a Beretta 92F appeared in his sight. Jong Hai had also used this gun before. Immediately after loading the gun, Jong Hai let out a long breath. This was the first time he used a gun to fight for his life. Take a hostage, or you can't escape. Just as Jong Hai was holding the gun, he suddenly heard the voice of the gangsters outside. When he heard this person's voice, Jong Hai couldn't help but secretly curse. They are really shameless. But this gave him an opportunity. He suddenly stood up from his half-squatting body and directly smashed the window on the other side of the MPV. When Aphrodite and others were ready to fight for their lives, Jong Hai opened half of the door. Get down! Just when Jong Hai opened this half of the door, the other half of the door was already opened by the other side. Seeing that it was Jiang Hai, Aphrodite and others didn't have time to think about what was going on. They instantly got down, and Jiang Hai also fired at this time. Sheila Rodney, who was slower to get down, even felt that the bullet flew over their heads. The people on the other side didn't expect Jiang Hai to open the door from the other side. In an instant, 6 or 7 blood flowers bloomed from the chests of the 2 gangsters who had just gotten up in front of the door. Jiang Hai didn't just shoot once, he shot continuously. Although the 2 gangsters protected their heads well, their bodies couldn't. In an instant, many bloody holes burst open. Their bodies went limp, and the 2 fell to the ground. At this time, the gangster who was pinned to the door knew that if this continued, he would be dead for sure. So he endured the severe pain and actually pulled out the knife together with his hand. Then he fired continuously with his pistol. Feeling his attack, not only did Aphrodite and others get down, but Jiang Hai also dodged and got down on the ground. On the ground, Jiang Hai just happened to see the gangster's foot through the bottom of the car. Without saying anything, he directly shot the guy's ankle. The gangster only felt his foot go limp. He screamed and instantly fell to the side. He was really unlucky. His hand was stabbed first, then his foot was hit, but the worst was yet to come. As he fell to the ground, his eyes met with Jiang Hai's. Although he wanted to shoot in an instant, unfortunately, he was still half a beat too slow. Jiang Hai looked at the gangster and calmly pulled the trigger. The bullet almost instantly passed through his throat, bringing a burst of blood. His body couldn't help but droop down powerlessly. Who the F*** CK? F*** CK? Eat more. I surrender. Seeing Jiang Hai take care of all his men in almost an instant, the driver who was still running over here couldn't help but curse, but he didn't fight to the death. Instead, he directly threw the weapon in the car aside and surrendered to the security guards who had rushed over. The security guards were not the police, so they were also a little confused at this time. The laws of the United States were not much different from those of Huaxia. Although you can defend yourself with a gun, if the other party surrendered, threw the gun away, or lost the ability to fight, it would still be troublesome to kill him in such a situation. Some people would even consider such a move as intentional homicide. So at this time, these security guards were a little confused, but at this time, Jiang Hai was already in a killing frenzy. He immediately got up from the ground, gun in hand, and walked over to the gangster over there. Jiang, he has already surrendered. You can't kill him. Seeing Jiang Hai's action, Moses Adams rushed over immediately and put his hands around Jiang Hai's waist and said with a serious face, "He and Jiang Hai have worked together for a long time. He knows that Jiang Hai is furious at this time, but he is a lawyer. He must stop him. Let me go." Feeling Moses Adams's action, Jiang Hai couldn't help but shout loudly, "There are surveillance cameras here. He has already surrendered. If you kill him, there will be trouble. Leave the rest to me. Just leave it to me." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Moses Adams also said loudly. He was really afraid that Jiang Hai would shoot. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai's originally angry eyes calmed down a little. He knew that in such a thing, this person's intentional murder would definitely not escape, but he was angry. How could Jiang Hai not be angry if he just let him go? Feeling Jiang Hai's hesitant gaze, the man shrugged and walked toward the security guard in front of him indifferently. Looking at his annoying look, Jiang Hai slowly pressed the muzzle of the gun. Suddenly, his hand pulled the trigger and a bullet instantly shot toward the man's thigh. The powerful firepower of the 92F made the bullet instantly tear his clothes and penetrate his flesh and bones. Although it did not penetrate, the man still screamed and fell into a pool of blood while covering his leg. Hearing the gunshot, Moses Adams, who was still holding Jiang Hai, could not help but be stunned. He immediately turned around to look at the man and found that the man was still moving. This proved that Jiang Hai did not kill him. At this time, Jiang Hai also walked in front of the man. "I won't kill you, but I will let you die in prison. In order to let you live better in prison, I will give you a gift." Bang, bang, bang. As Jiang Hai's voice fell, the gun in Jiang Hai's hand pulled the trigger again. The other leg, and 2 arms of the man, who was still screaming, were bitten by Jiang Hai's bullets at this time. His screams echoed in the street. He heard that Huaxia people, especially the rich people in Huaxia, were very law-abiding. He had already surrendered, so why did he still shoot? He felt that he had hurt his bones this time. He thought about how his hands and legs were useless. If he were to go to prison, he might as well just kill himself. That kind of life would be better. WUWA, WUWA, WUWA. At this time, the ear-piercing alarm rang. Jiang Hai casually threw the gun to the side and looked at the man on the ground. He knew that this man was not the mastermind. This matter was not over yet. Chapter 309. Hey, it seems that you won't be able to sleep well tonight, Moses Adams said jokingly as he handed Jiang Hai a can of coffee. Jiang Hai just shrugged. He didn't care much about it. He opened the cup of coffee and drank it. He looked up at the clock hanging on the wall of the police station. At this time, the clock had pointed to 6. It was not 6:00 in the morning, but 6:00 in the evening. Since he left Philip's office in Miami in the morning, he had been in the police station for 8 hours. At this time, only he and Moses Adams were in the Miami police station. Delina and the others had already gone back at noon. After all, they were the complete victims of today's incident, so they could leave after finishing their statements. As for Jiang Hai, as a victim of this incident and a murderer, he needed to stay here for a while. Moses Adams, on the other hand, had been running around. In the morning, he was copying the video. In the afternoon, he took the time to make a statement. At the same time, he was also looking for evidence for Jiang Hai. In fact, there was no evidence to speak of. Because whether it was the surveillance on the road, the surveillance of the auction house, or the civilian who set up the stall, or the car recorder, or the transcripts of the security guards, all proved that those people wanted to hit Jiang Hai. If they couldn't, they would get out of the car and shoot at Jiang Hai. The facts were very clear. The only thing that was not clear was that Jiang Hai shot the man after he surrendered. 3 of the 5 people who attacked Jiang Hai died. The first person who was hit by Jiang Hai with a wrench suffered from intracranial hemorrhage, skull fracture, and severe concussion. After the police arrived, he had been sent to the hospital. Moses Adams just sent news that the guy had cerebral palsy and would stay in bed for the rest of his life. The other person who survived was the one whose limbs were broken by Jiang Hai. This person was also a talent. After being sent to the hospital, he had an operation first. When he woke up at 6:00 in the afternoon, he said that he wanted to sue Jiang Hai. Today's incident became a different version of what had happened. He said that he and his 4 motorcycle enthusiasts were driving to a motorcycle club to have fun. On the way, his brakes failed. He almost hit Jiang Hai. After he stopped, his 4 friends got out of the car to see if Jiang Hai was all right. However, they realized that Jiang Hai was going to attack them. They were forced to fight back, but they were still beaten to death by Jiang Hai. In the end, he realized that the situation was not right and surrendered, but he was still beaten to such a state by Jiang Hai. He had to get the police to uphold justice for him. If they hadn't seen the surveillance with their own eyes, and if these guys didn't have criminal records, some of the police officers might have believed it, especially those who were more biased against Asians. After hearing Moses Adams's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be amused. He really knew how to twist facts. If he had been killed by them, perhaps it would have been an accident. The brakes of the car did fail, and these people did make an appointment to go to the motorcycle club on the phone. If there hadn't been a gunfight, and these people had killed him, then Jiang Hai would have died in vain. He had to admit that the person who planned to kill Jiang Hai, if he wasn't a repeat offender, then he really had some brains. Fortunately, the American police weren't all idiots. The surveillance video clearly showed that when these people hit Jiang Hai, when they got out of the car, Jiang Hai hadn't gotten up yet. They directly took out the pistols at their waists and started shooting. If it was really like what he said, why did they carry guns with them? They didn't wait for Jiang Hai to attack, and before the others could react, they had already opened fire. Moreover, at the last moment, they still wanted to rob the MPV. They deserved to be killed by Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai had no problem killing the 4 people. The only problem was that Jiang Hai crippled the person. Today's matter won't be over so easily. Throwing the empty coffee can into the trash can next to him, Jong Hai looked at his watch and said faintly to Moses Adams. Moses Adams naturally knew that when Jong Hai said it wasn't over, he didn't mean that Jong Hai wasn't finished. He had known Jong Hai for more than half a year. When had Jong Hai ever suffered such a big grievance? This time, the Grim Reaper's scythe almost landed on his head. No matter what, he couldn't let the other party go easily. I have no problem with legal matters. As for other things, I may not be able to do it. Hearing what Jong Hai said, Moses Adams sighed. It's not that he didn't want to help, but because he was a lawyer, there were some things that he couldn't cross the line. I understand this. Tell me what's going on. I can't get anything from the police. We don't have any power here. If you want to take revenge, you have to rely on yourself. Looking at Moses Adams in front of him, Jong Hai nodded. He had never suffered such a big loss. This time, no matter what, he wouldn't let the other party go easily. I heard that these people may have the power of the underworld in Miami. Many of them have criminal records, but I don't know who ordered them or why, but I think someone may know. Looking at Jong Hai, Moses Adams lowered his voice and whispered. Hearing his words, Jong Hai raised his eyebrows. This was what he wanted. Jong Hai, you can go, but these days, don't leave the United States. When the case is heard, I still need your cooperation. Jong Hai is a big taxpayer in Winthrop. Naturally, the police there are very kind to Jong Hai, including the police in Boston. They don't dare to offend Jong Hai, but here is Miami. No one will care about Jong Hai. Jong Hai didn't care about the cold attitude of the police, because he didn't count on the police at this time. It is said that it is never too late for a gentleman to take revenge, but unfortunately, Jong Hai is not a gentleman, he is a villain, so he will take revenge from morning to night. After leaving the police station, Jong Hai called Aphrodite and told them that he was safe, then got into a Cadillac rented by Moses Adams. As Moses Adams started the engine, Jong Hai followed him to the slums of Miami. On the way, he also told Jong Hai where they were going. The place we are going to now is called Evil Ghost Bar. Last time, I got the gun and spear gun for you from here. I have a high school classmate who is now a supervisor here, but this person is not reliable, but for dollars' sake, they will get you whatever you want, Moses Adams said to Jong Hai in the driver's seat. Hearing his words, Jong Hai nodded secretly. He just wanted to know some information. Soon, as Moses Adams turned left and right, Jong Hai and the others arrived at Evil Ghost Bar. This bar was located in the depths of the slums, but the hellish scene that Jong Hai imagined was not here. On the contrary, the neighborhood was very prosperous, even comparable to those commercial districts, and there were many famous luxury cars on this block. Jong Hai even saw a lot of Maseratis, Alfa Romeos, Ferraris, Porsches, and other cars parked on another street. The people walking on this block were also dressed in colorful clothes, and it was impossible to tell that this place was backward. This is sort of the middle point of the Miami area. It used to be as disgusting, dirty, and backward as other slums, but the boss here is a genius. After he consolidated the small gangs nearby, he cleaned up. Of course, it's not completely clean. It's better to say that it's gray than white because there are a lot of underground casinos and high-end clubs here. Those who are involved in illegal activities don't dare to openly go to the city to play, so this is the best choice. While looking for a parking space, Moses Adams whispered to Jong Hai. His car was not good here, of course it was not bad either. After parking the car, he led Jong Hai to the bar in the middle of the street with the evil ghost mask hanging on it. However, not everyone could enter this place. Without Moses Adams, it was estimated that Jong Hai would not be able to enter this place. After coming in, Jong Hai found that this place was not like the nightclub he imagined. The wild music inside made people very uncomfortable. Men and women were going crazy. Although there were a lot of cheers here, it was very quiet and there was no music. As Jong Hai turned a corner, he understood why. Because at this time, in this big bar, there was no DJ or stage. Instead, there was a huge hexagonal iron cage. At this time, two strong men were standing in the iron cage, constantly tearing each other. There were no rules in this kind of fight. Unless one side surrendered or fainted, the game would continue. Even if someone died, they could only say that they deserved it. At this time, there were two people on the stage. One was a typical Westerner with a huge body, big head, and white skin. His arms were thicker than his head. He was 2 meters tall, and also very intimidating. His opponent was an Asian who looked about 175 meters tall. Although his body was also muscular and unusually tight, it was not exaggerated. His hands were bandaged and he habitually raised his right leg like a cobra, looking for an opportunity to attack. Jiang Hai knew these two fighting techniques. Bell had taught him before. The Westerners used wrestling, which was a very popular fighting technique in the United States. Articulation and throwing skills were very strong in all fighting events, but what he was facing was not an ordinary fighting technique. Chapter 310. Muay Thai, Thai boxing, belonged to Thailand's traditional fighting techniques. It was extremely lethal and was a sport known for its strength and agility. If one were to say that the world's major boxing techniques actually had their own specialties, Taekwondo was good at kicking, Judo was good at joint techniques, wrestling was good at throwing, boxing was good at upper body punching and lower body small steps, Muay Thai was a fist technique that specialized in elbows, kicks, and close combat. Muay Thai's elbows could be said to be the heaviest elbows in the world. One elbow strike could even shatter a person's skull. As for their leg techniques, a long time ago, they were used to kick coconut trees by the beach. Only when a coconut tree was broken could they be considered to have reached the pinnacle of their leg techniques. Therefore, don't be fooled by the fact that the people who practiced Muay Thai were not considered to be tall and short in stature. Aside from their bones and muscles, their bodies were extremely resilient. Not only could they withstand attacks, but their attack power was also very strong. According to Bell, the most lethal fighting technique in the world was Muay Thai. However, Muay Thai was a little troublesome because it did not have any joint techniques. Therefore, when fighting, it would be more or less at a disadvantage. Especially in some gambling matches, the most open UFC had a lot of rules. Consecutive knee strikes were not allowed, and elbow strikes were not allowed. At the same time, a high whip kick to the back of the head was not allowed. In the world of Muay Thai, its ranking was not very high. Speaking of which, some martial arts fans might be unhappy. If they were talking about lethality, it would definitely be Hua Xia's Kung Fu that was the best. However, Hua Xia's Kung Fu had a special characteristic. What could be passed on had been simplified and was considered to be half performance. The truly lethal Kung Fu was not passed on to outsiders. The idea of passing it on to males and not females made Hua Xia's Kung Fu only exist in the hands of a few people. However, there was no way to promote these things.
Ah!
Suddenly, a loud shout from the ring attracted Jiang Hai's attention. At this time, the big white man in the ring attacked first. With a loud shout, his left hand turned into a claw and grabbed the man. This was also a wrestling gesture. As long as the opponent was caught, a series of throwing skills would follow. The opponent wouldn't even have time to react before being thrown to the ground. Jiang Hai's eyes were filled with disbelief. This Muay Thai expert wasn't joking. When he saw the person rushing over, he naturally knew that he couldn't be caught. Thus, he slipped and dodged the man's hand. At the same time, his leg whipped towards the man's left rib. With a bang, the big man took a kick from the master, but he didn't retreat. Instead, he endured the pain and grabbed the man's ankle with his empty right hand. With one hand, he threw the Muay Thai master into the iron cage next to him, causing the cage to shake. As for the audience outside the arena, they couldn't help but scream because of this violent scene. For them, this was what they came to see. I'm interested. We can place our bets later, but let's go and order some drinks first. Moses Adams couldn't help but smile when he saw Jiang Hai staring at the ring intently. Men always had no resistance to this kind of blood-boiling battle. However, they weren't here today to watch the competition. There's such a fun place. You didn't bring me here to play before. Jiang Hai said to Moses Adams as he reluctantly looked at the Muay Thai master and got up again. This place was indeed very interesting. Forget it, boss.
You have so many pairs of eyes staring at you.
Would I dare to bring you here? If it's just you and me next time, then it's fine. Moses Adams waved his hand when he heard Zhang Hai's words. Aphrodite and the others weren't joking. Zhang Hai could ignore them, but he couldn't. After all, these women were Zhang Hai's people. Haha, there will be a chance. Thinking that Aphrodite and the others had been watching him closely recently, Zhang Hai couldn't help but smile awkwardly. However, he would definitely come here again in the future, so he wasn't in a hurry. Hey Moses, you're here again. Is the guy I gave you last time good? Moses Adams and Zhang Hai just came from the big bar, and a man who looked about the same age as Moses Adams came over with a big belly. He handed him a glass of whiskey and said with a smile, "Such a big lawyer naturally wouldn't owe him money for drinks. I'm driving tonight, and I'm going back tonight. Forget about the drink. Boss, are you interested?" Moses Adams pushed the glass in front of him forward and said to the man opposite him, then asked Zhang Hai, "Just to calm down." Zhang Hai didn't hold back. After casually stuffing a $100 bill into the money box next to him, he picked up the glass of whiskey in front of him and directly drank it without putting any ice in it. Most of the whiskey in Miami was produced in South America, which was slightly different from the whiskey in Boston. The whiskey in Boston was produced in Canada or the United States. Maybe the raw materials were different, so it was mellower. But here, there was a hint of sweetness. To be honest, Zhang Hai still preferred the whiskey here. At least it didn't taste so bad in the mouth. Haha, what a generous boy. Looking at Zhang Hai in front of him, the big man on the other side couldn't help but laugh. Well, John, let me introduce you. This is my boss. We are not here to drink today. I have something to ask you. Hearing the big man's happy look, Moses Adams knocked on the table, then put a roll of whiskey on the bar, but he didn't give it to the man. Instead, he asked first. "Tell me, I'll see if it's worth this price." At a glance, the man named John had already seen the amount of money in this roll of whiskey. If he guessed right, it should be $1,000. As a big lawyer, he is more generous than the average person. Don't worry, you will definitely be satisfied with this price. I want to know the news of Greyhound Terry. Pushing his glasses up, Moses Adams asked. The Greyhound Terry he mentioned was the driver who hit Zhang Hai today. This man's original name was Terry Anderson, but after Moses Adams asked, the police told him that this guy's other name was the name he used to hang around here. Greyhound Terry? He's just a nobody. We're all old classmates. He's only worth this much. Hearing Moses Adams' words, the man smiled and stretched out 2 fingers, indicating that the news of this guy is only worth $200. I have other things to ask you. But Moses Adams didn't take the money back, but directly threw the roll of money to him and asked, "Zhang Hai didn't come here just to catch small fish this time. This Greyhound Terry is a gangster around here. He used to steal cars. After he went in a few times, he met a leader in Miami named Justin Parker. Now he can be regarded as a small leader. He usually fights and sells flour. I know you definitely don't want to hear his news, so I'll tell you a little more for the sake of these dollars." Picking up the money in front of him, John smiled and continued to talk to Zhang Hai. The man who hit Zhang Hai today is just a nobody. Such a guy, even if you give him 10 times the courage, he wouldn't dare to hit Zhang Hai. As soon as they heard the name Zhang Hai, they knew that the person who wanted Zhang Hai's life should be this guy named Justin Parker. Zhang Hai is also AF** King Dog. How can he be like this? Every time he leaves Winthrop, he has to run into a guy named Justin. But last time, at most, he was embarrassed, but this time, he was going to lose his life. Terry wasn't a powerful person, but this Justin Parker wasn't someone to be trifled with. This kid is a mix of Black and Latin American. He was an orphan since childhood. He was very ruthless. When he was in the orphanage, he once stabbed a child older than him to death. Because of this, he was sent to juvenile detention. Later, he married the son of a Colombian tycoon. After they were sent out together, he worshipped this big brother as his godfather. But a wolf cub can't be raised well. About 5 years ago, this guy first killed this big brother's son, then killed this big brother, and took over many of this big brother's businesses. Although he is not the most famous person in this area, his wealth is worth tens of millions. However, his net worth was also in the tens of millions. He had dozens of underlings under him and managed several blocks. Recently, I heard that he is very close to a rich second generation from Huaxia. That person provided him with funds and let him start to occupy the entire gray area of Miami. Recently, many bosses have been studying how to get rid of him. Looking at Jiang Hai and Moses Adams, this person couldn't help but whisper with a smile. Hearing this, Jiang Hai's frown unconsciously loosened. He was originally very surprised because since he came here, he didn't seem to have any conflicts with the locals. The only time he had a conflict was when he bought the yacht. But a manager who sold the yacht was not arrogant enough to hire a hitman to kill him. So when this person mentioned Justin Parker, Jiang Hai was very puzzled. Because in his memory, he didn't seem to have any relationship with these gray areas. But now he suddenly understood. The rich second generation from Huaxia, needless to say, is Qinfen. After being beaten by me, this guy seems to be very dishonest. He even dares to do such a thing behind my back. Seeing Jiang Hai's narrowed eyes, Moses Adams also smiled. He knew that every injustice has its perpetrator and every debt has its debtor. This time, he had found the debtor. As for Jiang Hai, he picked up the wine glass in front of him and drank the contents of the glass in one big gulp. Boss, if you want revenge, I shouldn't interfere, but you still need to consider the method. The other party has dozens of underlings. Seeing Jiang Hai's appearance, Moses Adams also said softly, "This matter is really not easy to handle. I remember that in the gray area, there seems to be a saying that money can solve this problem. Where is it?" Chapter 311. Here is fine. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, John shrugged. This was the middle of the gray area. Naturally, they would accept some special jobs. For example, if someone wanted to hire a hitman to kill someone, they liked such big clients very much. That's the best. 10 million for the head of Justin Parker. No matter who it is, if he brings his head here, 10 million is his. 20 million for the head of the Huaxia. Similarly, no matter who brought it, take it away for 20 million. Jiang Hai looked at John in front of him and poured himself another glass of whiskey. While smelling the strong alcohol smell of the whiskey, Jiang Hai said the above paragraph as if he was sleep-talking. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, John on the opposite side was stunned. Taking out 30 million just to kill 2 people? If this guy is not bullshitting, then he is really rich. Boss, isn't your price a bit too high? Although Moses Adams had nothing to do with these gray areas, it was essential for him to understand the market conditions of various periods, so he also knew the prices here. Even if these 2 people had a lot of power, 30 million for their lives was really a bit of a fuss. It doesn't matter, the money is worth it. Jiang Hai couldn't deal with the other party himself. First, the police were watching him now. Second, he didn't think that he was now a match for dozens of armed robbers. If he could spend money to solve the problem, then it was naturally the best. Anyway, he was not short of money now. Are you sure? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, John's breathing became heavy. For him, no. Even for the people behind him, 30 million was a lot of money. I'm very sure. I'll leave this matter to you. Hearing John's words, Jiang Hai looked at him and nodded seriously. He then turned to Moses Adams beside him and said something to him. I'll be staying here for another week to 10 days. I hope to resolve this matter during this period of time. Jiang Hai said softly as he gently knocked on the bar counter. Then the 3 of them looked at each other and couldn't help but laugh. For some people, not to mention 10 days, 3 days was more than enough. Less than half an hour later, Jiang Hai and Moses Adams left the place. When they passed by the iron cage again, the 2 men were already spent. The white man's face was disfigured, his nose was fractured, one of his eyes could no longer be opened, and several of his ribs were broken. One of his front teeth was knocked out, and his head was covered in blood. At this time, he was leaning against the iron cage, gasping for breath, while the Muay Thai master opposite him was already lying on the ground. Looking at his tightly shut eyes and his bent arm, if it wasn't for his undulating chest, it was almost certain that this person was already dead. But even if he wasn't dead now, this person probably wouldn't be able to get out of bed without at least a year of rest. And this white man, although he won, his situation wasn't much better than the person lying on the ground. After taking a look at the white man, Zhang Hai turned around and left. Unfortunately, he didn't see the good scene just now. That night, Zhang Hai and Moses Adams drove back to the hotel. After returning to the hotel, they found that Aphrodite and the others were in their rooms and didn't go back to rest. When they saw Zhang Hai come back, they all stood up nervously, especially Delina and Marion. The two girls immediately ran over and hugged Zhang Hai. To be honest, today's scene was too scary. Okay, I'm fine now, aren't I? Good girls, have you eaten yet? If not, ask them to send it up. Touching the hair of the two girls, Zhang Hai said slowly. He knew that today's incident had indeed caused an indelible psychological trauma to these girls. It seems that as a father, he really didn't take advantage of his position. Ahem, boss, I'll go back first. You can continue. Looking at the scene in front of him, Moses Adams smiled awkwardly, then turned and left Zhang Hai's room. He felt embarrassed standing in Zhang Hai's room. Oh, okay. Help me look after tonight's matter. I won't treat you badly. Hearing Moses Adams' words, Zhang Hai also turned his head and said to him with a soft smile. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Moses Adams also nodded and respectfully left the room and returned to his room. Just as he closed Zhang Hai's door, the other girls, like Delina and Marion, rushed up and hugged Zhang Hai tightly, as if they were really afraid of losing him. Ahem, don't be like this. Let me sit down first. Feeling his body getting heavier and heavier, Zhang Hai couldn't help but cough twice. Hearing Zhang Hai's cough, the girls reacted and let Zhang Hai sit on the sofa over there. However, they still refused to leave Zhang Hai. Delina and Marion hugged Zhang Hai's arms tightly from both sides, not letting go. Jenny and Bridget sat on the carpet, one of them hugging Zhang Hai's leg, while Ohilia and Shira firmly held Zhang Hai's hands. As for Becky and Hilda, they hugged Zhang Hai's shoulders. Dana was more direct and directly hugged Zhang Hai's waist. The pair of fully grown things just happened to press on Zhang Hai's lower abdomen, making Zhang Hai feel a little embarrassed. But before he had the time to feel embarrassed, Aphrodite had already walked behind him and hugged Zhang Hai's neck from behind. The pair of fully grown things just happened to be at the back of Zhang Hai's head, making it difficult for Zhang Hai to relax or exert force. After all, if he exerted force, it would be easy for problems to arise. I say, I'm fine, right? You're fine too, aren't you? Have you eaten anything? Let's order some food. Feeling the softness coming from all directions, Zhang Hai couldn't help but say helplessly, "We can't eat." Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Aphrodite, who was hugging Zhang Hai's head, said to Zhang Hai with a slightly sobbing tone, "If you haven't lost something, you won't know how to cherish it." These girls went from having nothing in the past to becoming what they were now. This kind of life was something they had never dreamed of before. It could be said that the life by Zhang Hai's side now was not an exaggeration to say that it was heaven. At least, it was so in their eyes. They could talk happily every day, work hard, eat delicious food, and have Zhang Hai stuffed in their hearts. They had beautiful clothes to wear, good sisters by their side, and they didn't have to look at anyone's face. This kind of life could only be considered good in the eyes of ordinary people, but in the eyes of these girls, it was already the best. It was precisely living in this kind of environment that made them all the more reluctant. If anything happened to Zhang Hai, to them, Zhang Hai was really their everything. In the past, apart from Aphrodite, the other girls' feelings for Zhang Hai were mostly to repay his kindness. But after this time, it had slowly changed. Now, in their eyes, Zhang Hai was not only their benefactor, but also their meal ticket. After this time, they finally understood that Zhang Hai's position in their hearts was very important. If there were only 100 things in their hearts, then Zhang Hai already occupied more than 80. This kind of feeling wasn't love, nor was it liking, but it was more than liking. This kind of dependence made them completely unable to imagine what would happen to them if something happened to Zhang Hai. Then what do you want to do? This can't go on forever. How about you all go back to sleep? Hearing that the girls didn't want to eat, Zhang Hai didn't know what to say. After hesitating for a moment, he could only say this. We don't want to go back. I'm scared. I want to sleep with you. But after listening to Zhang Hai's words, the reaction of the 10 girls became even more intense. Aphrodite and the others didn't say anything, but Delina and Marian had already raised their heads. Their big eyes were filled with tears. Seeing this, Zhang Hai couldn't help but feel helpless. But this is not good. Hearing the girls' thoughts, Zhang Hai couldn't help but helplessly say, I don't care. We just want to sleep with you. Hearing Zhang Hai's tangled words, Marian also threw a tantrum, but to be honest, in this situation, they really didn't dare to go back to sleep. Feeling the girls' firm hearts, Zhang Hai helplessly sighed. If it's a blessing, it's not a curse, but if it's a curse, it can't be avoided. Then, where are we going to sleep? On the sofa. That's it? Go back to the room and sleep. Looking at the girls around him who were like frightened bunnies, Zhang Hai helplessly shrugged. The girls listened to his words, nodded, and followed Zhang Hai back to the room. Lying on Zhang Hai's big bed, the originally very big bed couldn't accommodate 11 people. The 11 people were almost tightly squeezed together, but they didn't have a trace of impatience. Smelling Zhang Hai's scent, these girls could finally sleep peacefully. As for Zhang Hai, he was also a little sleepy. Although his nose was full of the girls' scent, which made Zhang Hai's heart pound, he couldn't really move. While Zhang Hai was sleeping soundly here, things became complicated on the gray streets of Miami. Son of a B******, who the F******, 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 F******. Angry shouts came from the second floor of a nightclub, accompanied by the sound of things being smashed. There was almost no one in the most popular nightclub at this time, because this was Justin Parker's base camp. Half an hour after Zhang Hai and Moses Adams left, the news that Justin's head was worth $10 million had spread throughout Miami. Although the tycoons in Miami did not care about $10 million, who would complain about money? You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.